I'm actually going to need you to wait a few minutes until I finish what I'm doing here. I'm doing something extremely important.
You pay more bills?
No,
Deep
not
cut.
tonight. No, that is a deep cut. No, I'm entering the Virginia Tech football schedule for this fall. It's very important business.
Where are you entering it?
In my calendar. Anyway, we can get started. I don't know. Well, I feel glum. And
What, the traumatic brain injuries in a football game that you're into watching? Is that why you feel glum?
Wow, it's like that, is it?
I'm not hitting them in the head.
Wow. Hey, for what it's worth, I'm weaning myself off of football.
It doesn't seem like you are. It seems like you're preparing to settle in for another season.
I'm weaning myself off of football by entering every single game that my HomePods play into my calendar.
My HomePods. No, I've weaned myself off the NFL because the NFL is terrible. Even leaving aside football as a terrible sport, which I'm not debating it's terrible, the NFL is particularly and uniquely terrible. And it just so happens that my favorite NFL football team is also terrible. And so that was a really good time to just wean myself off the NFL.
But that's like saying, like, I give up alcohol except beer. Like, it's,
right, yeah, it's baby steps, man.
Not really.
I don't smoke weed. I just listen to Fish.
That's very different. You know it.
All right, we should probably get started with some follow-up. And Blake Walsh wanted this. I don't know if I should be offended by this or overjoyed by this. Probably overjoyed. But this is the most preposterous yet beautiful follow-up we've gotten in a while. Blake Walsh wanted us to know that we were not looking at the Windows logo on one of John's mice. We were actually looking at the Microsoft logo because it is a perfect square rather than whatever you call that other object, which is like slanty on the top and the bottom.
This is amazing. This is like, okay, this is not the Windows logo. That's the Microsoft logo. You can obviously tell the difference because the Microsoft logo is basically straight and the Windows logo is basically the same thing in italics. It's like, okay, totally different. Same thing, but slanted. Ooh.
This is one of those pieces. So here, this is a little inside baseball, but when one is a podcaster, especially doing a nerdy podcast, one will receive all sorts and manner of feedback. And nerds often, but not always, are not the most socially adept creatures. And sometimes the feedback comes across deeply obnoxious, even if it really honestly wasn't meant that way. This is one of those times where I think it really could have been one of those like, ooh, this could go real bad. Like, hey, you idiots. That's the Windows. That's not the Windows logo. That's the Microsoft logo. What's wrong with you? But no, thank you, Blake Walsh, for riding that line ever so deftly. And this was well done, well executed. I was happy to receive this. This was quite funny.
He wasn't the only one to send it, though. A lot of people sent this feedback.
I'm just so happy that, like, obviously, a company like Microsoft, when they change their logo, this is not a small process. And I can imagine, like, all the board meetings and design reviews and research surveys and branding exercises that all led them to finally come up with, here's a square with, two lines forming gaps that make window panes. This is going to be the Microsoft logo. And then, all right, now we need a Windows logo. Go through all that same process again, and then they come out with the exact same thing.
This is not a new logo, by the way. It's been a logo for years. And I'm familiar with the Windows one from all that time. I spent watching the Windows 10 installer run. I think what threw me on the mouse, other than me just being old, is that I'm used to seeing the new Microsoft logo in its color form. Like it's a play on the old, you remember, think back to Windows 95, the Windows logo, it's like a wavy flag with these little pixelated squares coming off the end. And that wavy flag is cut into 4 pieces, and the 4 pieces are different colors, right? The modern Microsoft logo is a play on that, where it is flattened out, because, flat versus the puffy, whatever, 90s era design. And the colors are slightly different and muted or whatever, right? But that's what it is. Like, it's not, yes, when you look at it, it is 4 squares stuck to each other, right? But if you know the history of the logo, you're like, oh, I see how that's kind of a modern simplification and refinement of what I knew to be the Windows logo. But it's not the Windows logo, it's the Microsoft logo. And then the Windows logo itself looks more like a window. It's perspective skewed, so it looks like a window on the side of a house. And I think there's a color variant of that, maybe. But anyway, you see it in Windows itself, surprise, when you're watching the installer and when you're logging in and stuff like that. I actually don't think the logos are that bad. It is just very, in the black and white version, there's really not much to it. And you really need to have a little bit more character, I think, to pull off a monochrome logo. Like the Apple logo is pretty darn good, let's just say. And it looks good in color. It looks good in its original rainbow stripes, and it looks good in monochrome. And also, it's got a strong outline. This does not really have a strong outline. If you didn't even know it was a company logo, and you saw it on the mouse, you're like, I think it would just be invisible. The Windows logo does look more like a logo because it is perspective skewed. So I think that's not actually that bad. But both of them require you to have sort of a cultural knowledge of the history of Microsoft and related stuff to get anything from it. Whereas you don't have to know anything about Apple, the company, to understand this is the cultural significance and, American significance of the Apple, biblical significance of the Apple, and with the bite out of it and everything. Like, it's all there in the logo. You don't need to know that it's Apple Computer and Steve Jobs worked on an orchard and all that other stuff. So anyway, not every company can be Apple, but
yeah, I didn't know that.
I don't think Microsoft is. I think these logos are actually not that bad. And I certainly like the Windows logo better than the weird wavy flag Windows 95 one, which was very dated, even when it was new.
Of course you would say that. All right, John, tell us about how you get that darn Dropbox icon out of the Finder, if you please.
Yeah, Setu Shah wrote in to tell me how to get rid of the Finder extensions. It's not like a preference in Dropbox anymore where it's like you disable Finder integration. I had totally forgotten that there is an extensions preference pane because I'm not reviewing the OS anymore and I forget about these things. And in it, there is a whole list of all sorts of extensions. There is one category called Finder. And if you go to the Finder extensions, I have a bunch listed here that are mostly just the Apple built-in ones. Oh, that's just the Finder things. Yeah, there's Finder and Finder extensions. Not that that's confusing. Anyway, I have OneDrive, Dropbox, some Adobe thing, Expand Drive, iCloud Drive, and also Dropbox. And so I disabled Dropbox. In fact, I unchecked every single box in the Finder extensions thing just to cover all my bases. Did that fix the problem? No, it did not. I'm glad to know that this is here, but it didn't fix it. But while I was in here messing with this stuff, I was like, what else can I turn off? Can I just stop anything from extending anything to see if I can find out what this problem is? I scrolled down the sort of source list on the left-hand side, and I clicked on Quick Look, which is also a thing in the Finder. There are Quick Look plugins when you can, select the file in the Finder, hit spacebar, and it will preview it, and you can have plugins that understand different file formats and everything. And when I clicked on the Quick Look sidebar item in this preference pane, in the background, all my Finder windows instantly spawn toolbars. Just clicking on the Quick Look.
What?
Just clicking on the item, like not actually doing it. Let me see if I can do it again. This happened right before the show, so it's fresh in my mind. Let's get this, and let's see. There. If I click on Quick Look. Yep, did it again. Reproducible. I just clicked on Quick Look, and all my Finder windows, boop, popped inside toolbars. So there's some weird stuff going on here. Investigation continue, but I'm glad to know that there is some... I'm glad to know I have some kind of reproduction. I'll probably try to make a movie of this and send it to Apple in vain.
Moving on, Anonymous Pro Display XDR presets. John, tell us about your Pro Display XDR, if you please.
They're not the presets aren't anonymous. This is an anonymous source on Pro Display XDR.
Is that not what I said? Sorry. I immediately glaze over when I see Mac Pro Talk, so my apologies.
It's not Mac Pro Talk. You can use this display with Marco's laptop.
Not with my iMac Pro, though, so it's dead to me.
Well, you can, just at 5K, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah. Anyway, I was asking the questions about the display, like sort of profile presets. One of them was called Pro Display XDR P3 1600 nits, and one was like Apple Display P3 500 nits. What was the deal with those? So here is an anonymous source giving a fairly authoritative answer. So it's basically what you would expect. In the default Pro Display XDR P3 1600 nits one, it can display up to 1600 nits of HDR content, but it's only when it's showing HDR stuff. The macOS UI renders an SDR with a maximum of 500 nits, and you can control that brightness with the sort of brightness slider and the buttons on your keyboard or whatever. But it composites any HDR content into that same scene. You can see this really well if you get the aerial screensaver, which is like the Apple TV slow motion flying over cities movie screensaver. Someone ported that to the Mac because all of those video URLs are publicly accessible. The video files are publicly accessible URLs on Apple servers, so someone made a screensaver out of them, and a bunch of them are 4K and HDR. So when you go to the screensaver preference pane, the whole rest of your screen is SDR, because the entire Mac UI is SDR, but this little tiny window is HDR, showing you a preview of like what the screensaver is going to look like, and it's like this little tiny portal into a brighter world inside your monitor. It's really freaky. Although it does make me wish like they should like update the Mac OS UI to be HDR like somehow. So then the next, remember how amazed we were at Aqua? Like, wow, look at this UI. It's like a movie interface and everything squishes and everything is like composited and there are soft shadows and you can see through stuff and let's slow motion genie a playing movie into the dock. The next step of that, the next wow factor is HDR UI. You heard it here first.
Arial, that screensaver is very good, by the way. It's my preferred screensaver if I'm not just going to put up like family pictures or something like that. It is very, very good.
Yeah. Oh, and one more bit on the display stuff. So the SDR preset is there if you want to see, for people who want to see what content will look like on an SDR display, right? So sometimes you want, like you're, creating content that not everyone has an HDR television or monitor or whatever, and you want to see what it's going to look like. So the SDR preset is tailored for that. And this person suggests that unless you're doing that, unless you are trial running content to make sure it looks okay in SDR, just leave it on the default, which is what I'm doing. P3 1600 nits.
I love the idea of running the Arial screensaver, especially on an XDR, because you have the whole original idea of the screensaver of like, let's, make your screen do something that's, going to keep it in motion and everything so it doesn't get burned in or whatever else. So basically, like, literally try to conserve the screen's lifespan. And meanwhile, you're going to do something that requires like downloading hundreds of gigs of video and then playing HDR video so that the screen actually uses more of its capacity while it's allegedly idling.
But it still keeps the thing in motion. So if you're worried about image retention or whatever, it's not keeping the same image. It changes slowly, but enough that the image changes on the screen. And it's only 33 gigs, by the way. I know because I downloaded them all because I have so much disk space. Disk space. This is going to be like when we talk about taping things, you realize. We're going to talk about our disk space. And be like, what the hell is disk space?
It's almost as bad as somebody abbreviating pictures, picked.
No, that's totally unrelated. Although people are going to say, and why is disk with a K? It really annoys me when people don't understand disk with a C versus disk with a K when it comes to computer technology because you see it all the time and it's very consistent, but people... I guess they're not that observant. Anyway, all this knowledge will be lost like tears in rain.
All right, tell me, John, about your Logitech G305 Lightspeed mouse, if you don't mind.
We talked about the mice on the last episode, but I didn't have that one. I now do have it. I was motivated to get it, even without actually trying it in person, because I'm like I'm never getting to the store. I'm never going to actually go to Best Buy and try to, try this thing. So let me just get it. Mostly because I heard from a lot of people who are fans, and it has a higher refresh rate, like it does 1,000 samples per second, and the other ones are like 500 or something. It's like, it's a very high sampling rate for games, so you can do fast motion with the mouse, and it can keep up with it, and, it won't lose track of where you are and all the other good stuff. And this is like it's not like a high-end gaming mouse, it's like a low-end one, but it's got the same shape as my beloved old crappy MX300 / Logitech USB wheel mouse thing. It's so clearly like the same plastic molds, but like with a modernized front. It's kind of like when they put a new, front fascia on a model of car. Anyway.
Like a Tesla.
Yeah. I'm sure on the inside it's totally different. Anyway, I got it. I'm using it right now. The absurd thing, which is kind of explicable when you can explain it, but it still seems a little absurd, is remember I installed like the Logitech software that I was saying was really cool and, managed all your devices and had settings and put it in the cloud and all that stuff. Well, the gaming line of mice has its own software that is totally unrelated to the consumer side. It has its own website too, by the way. If you go to Logitech.com and look at all the mice, you won't see a single gaming mouse. You have to go to like LogitechG.com or something. They like have all their gaming brand where everything is, black with RGB LEDs in it and everything. And they don't even cross promote. It seems like it's just two totally different bins. So here I am over in the G land, and I got this G mouse. First of all, it's incredibly light. I know this is a thing with mice. People, take out the one AA battery, and sometimes people put in a lithium battery, which is lighter, or they get one of those adapters that lets you use a AAA in a AA space just to save weight. The new trend now is gaming mice with holes in them, like sort of cheese grater holes, like mesh plastic to be just incredibly light. So this thing is,
oh my goodness,
very, very light. And it kind of makes sense, it has more momentum. Although I do wonder with the lightness thing, like if you watch people review gaming mice on YouTube or whatever, they're all about weighing them on their little food scales to find out how many grams they are. And yes, it takes less force to stop a mouse from moving in one direction and move it into another. Like you can change direction more quickly with less effort with a lighter mouse. Totally makes sense. But I question the assumption that being able to change direction with very little force is necessarily good, given the vagaries of the human motor system. Like a little bit of momentum in terms of when your mouse is headed in one direction and you try to slow it down and bring it in another direction to correct. I'm not sure, like just imagine you were doing with like an invisible mouse, a 0 gram mouse. I'm not sure that's the best performance for gaming. Like I think a little bit of the momentum is good to smooth out the, the twitching of your tendons. I don't know. Anyway, the gamers love light mice. So it's very light. That has the side effect of making it feel cheap because, like stereo components and all sorts of other things, tungsten cylinders, if they're light, they feel cheap. Like it feels like there's nothing in it, because guess what? There's nothing in it. The plastic is thin. The thing itself is light. It feels cheap. It glides really nice. It's got 4 feet on the bottom, I think. Let me see. Yeah, 4 feet. Plus, it's also it's got a little 35th foot at the very tail, like a little dot, and it's got a little bit of the non-stick stuff, the slippery stuff around the sensor. So maybe 6 feet. Anyway, glides really smooth. Tracking is unbelievable. It comes with its own new little dongle. It doesn't work with the Logitech Unified dongle. It comes with its own little dongle, the Lightspeed dongle, which looks exactly the same, but it's totally different. It also comes with an extension cable to extend the dongle away from your interference having USB 3.0 peripherals. It's mostly just to get it close to your mouse. It's like a very long, thin cord that you could snake from your computer and put it presumably like right in front of your laptop. Like it's got like little feet on this little dongle thing that says, it's like a USB extension cable, but with little feet on it. So it can be just like an inch from your thing. So you're getting maximum signal strength on your wireless mouse. And it really is shaped like my old mouse. So it's like, hey, old friend has come back. But it's got 2 side buttons on the side. And because it's shaped like my old mouse, there's no place for those side buttons to hide. So I kind of feel them by my thumb because they're right on the flat side of the mouse. And, they're not perched up on the top of it or whatever. And then the scroll wheel, finally. The scroll wheel is plasticky, rubberized stuff. It is better than my ancient mouse, but it's not in the same league as any of the metal wheels. It feels cheap. It makes more noise when it turns. Here, listen to it. You can hear it, and it, there's no free spinning. There's no ratcheting. There's no different modes. The button where the ratcheting, switcher thing usually is changes DPI, so you can change to like less sensitivity when you're sniping or whatever. Anyway.
Why would you want... Okay.
Because when you're zoomed in and sniping and you want to make fine adjustments with larger motions of your hands, you know what I mean?
I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's such a prominent feature on the gaming mouse lines that you can configure up to like maybe 5 or 6 or 7 different DPI levels and configure exactly what they are and then cycle through them and have like keys to swap to them. Like when you hold down shift, it'll swap to one and then the other one will be the default and you can hit the button to cycle through them. The software is very complicated and very gamery. And both of them, by the way, the original Logitech Options software installed like a local web server or something that I immediately disabled. God knows what it's doing.
Oh, no.
I haven't even looked at what this gaming thing installed. I think it installed, actually, I looked at the package content. They use Pacifist, which is a great program you should check out. It lets you open any .pkg file on the Mac and see what's inside it, and then probably will let you know where it's going to install them, like what is included. Are there any launch agents or launch daemons? Are files going into application support? Are files going into user local?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I looked inside of this one and had a bunch of drivers for like force feedback wheels. Like it's their Logitech gaming software, period. It's not just for this mouse. So I buy any Logitech gaming peripherals, it works with this. So now I have 2 large wads of Logitech code running. And by the way, this mouse, the drivers that come with it, there's like a menu bar icon, a Logitech gaming menu bar icon. And I think if you quit that thing, all of that software that goes with the mouse just goes away. And then the mouse is controlled by, just Mac OS. And it feels different. Like the Logitech software that's controlling it has a bazillion settings, and it feels different when you use it that way. And when you quit the software, the whole mouse feels different. So I kind of feel like I have to run the software when I'm using the mouse.
That would be a deal breaker for me.
Same.
Like I don't mind it when software like writes settings to the mouse, and then you can quit it, and the mouse kind of retains those settings. I don't mind that.
It has that feature. Like, there is memory on the mouse, and there's also, you can save them on the internet or whatever. But I in my brief experimentation, even when I write the settings to the mouse and when I quit the software, I think the acceleration curves are different because you can customize that too. And the OS's acceleration curves are different as well. I realized I'm also running steer mouse. I turned off steer mouse for this mouse, so I think it's just using Logitech software. None of them feel bad. With and without the software, I don't feel bad, but it feels a little bit better with, because I spent all that time tweaking the DPI settings and everything. Yeah, and I know what you're saying about it being a deal breaker. Like, how many drivers and the menu bar icon is not monochrome, by the way. It's bluish, so it's like, ugh.
Oh, another deal breaker for me.
Yeah. But that said, I think this mouse is closest to what I was looking for in terms of the shape. Like, it almost is. I bet it's the same damn plastic molds. Like, the buttons are different, but it's what I was looking for with the side buttons aside. And I'm kind of glad to have a gaming mouse, because if I ever do any gaming, boot into Windows and try playing Destiny once I get a better video card or whatever, I'll probably use this mouse, because the 1000 hertz polling stuff and all of the configuration options for this and presets for different games and everything, I like it. It's good. But for my day-to-day stuff, I think I might be back to my current winner, which is, I think now still the Microsoft Precision mouse. Because here's the thing. When I use the Precision mouse, it's like knobs in cars, on toasters and stereo equipment. It feels expensive. I'm sitting in front of what I know to be objectively a very stupidly expensive computer. And when the things I touch with my hands also feel expensive, I'm like, I'm sitting in front of my expensive computer. When I use this mouse, I'm like, what is this am I using? This feels kind of janky and, lightweight, and like I could crush it with my fingers because the plastic is so thin. It doesn't feel expensive. It's just stupid. It's like, why do you care what it feels? But that's an important part of the interface. I mean, think if you buy like a car with a nice leather wrapped steering wheel versus a car with a shiny plastic steering wheel with like plastic mold seams on it. It doesn't really matter how great the car is. If you insert your favorite car here, whether it's a luxury sedan or a sports car, and you slap on a steering wheel from like a 1984 Chevy base model, it's not going to feel as good. Even though the car is the same and has the same performance characteristics and the same ride and the same handling, it feels worse because the thing you're touching feels cheaper. And that is definitely the experience of using the very light gaming mouse with my very heavy and expensive computer. And also, the scroll wheel just feels way better on the Microsoft one. It is my favorite scroll wheel. I'm very addicted to it now. I do like the lack of a thumb shelf on this one. So anyway, I'm going to give this one a few more days just because for all these mice, I want to use them for multiple days, not just pass judgment after a day of use. But that's my judgment so far on the Logitech G305 Lightspeed.
We are sponsored this week by Casper, who makes awesome mattresses and sleep products. Casper products are cleverly designed by humans for humans to provide supportive comfort for all kinds of bodies. You spend a third of your life sleeping, and they believe you should be comfortable, so their experts work tirelessly to make quality sleep surfaces that cradle your natural geometry in all the right places. It all started with the original Casper mattress. This combines multiple supportive memory foams for a quality sleep surface with just the right amounts of both sink and bounce, a breathable design to help you sleep cool, and with over 20,000 reviews at an average of 4.8 stars across Casper, Amazon, and Google, it is becoming the internet's favorite mattress. And they now offer 3 other mattresses as well: the Wave, the Essential, and the Hybrid. The Wave, this is the one that I sleep on. I've been sleeping on it for over a year now, and I gotta say, I'm a big fan. The Wave features a patent-pending premium support system to mirror the natural shape of your body. They also have the Essential, a streamlined design at a price that won't keep you up at night. The Hybrid, which combines the pressure relief of the award-winning foam with durable yet gentle springs, and also a wide array of other products like pillows and sheets to ensure an overall better sleep experience. All of their products are designed, developed, and assembled right here in the U.S., and they're brought to you at affordable prices because Casper cuts out middle people and sells directly to you. They're all backed by free delivery right to your door within the U.S. and Canada, free returns, and you can be sure of your purchase with Casper's 100-night risk-free sleep on it trial. And if you're not completely satisfied after that time, they'll just take it right back for free within the US and Canada. So get $100 towards select mattresses by visiting casper.com/ATP2019 and using code ATP2019 at checkout. That's casper.com/ATP2019 with special code ATP2019. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you to Casper for sponsoring our show.
So I wanted to call your attention to a podcast by a friend of the show, Jonathan Mann, called As It Happens, Song a Day. And this is a podcast he's doing chronicling him creating a song every single day. You know him because he does the closing theme for the show. And some of you also know that there's stuff that happens after that theme, which we've talked about on and off over the last several years. Anyways, the episode that came out this week, I don't know what number it is, but we'll put a link in the show notes. It's about the post-WWDC episode from this past June, which includes tweets from me and I think Marco and John, if I'm not mistaken. It certainly includes tweets from some of us. And it's a quick 15 minutes on the nose, and I listened to it earlier, and it's quite enjoyable. So I just wanted to point you in that direction if you wanted to check it out.
Yeah, the whole process of writing songs, to me, as somebody who has never done anything even close to that, seems like magic. Like, and I think, one thing that Jonathan Mann shows is that, you can get surprisingly good at that if that's what you do and you practice. Like, that's what he does. He's been practicing by writing songs every day for, how long has it been? Like 10 years or something? 9 years, something like that? He's gotten really good at it. And it's really interesting to hear his process. And that's what this podcast does. Like, it explains, like, it's him talking through, and you can kind of see, like, how these songs get made. And I don't know, I find that fascinating.
Real-time follow-up, over 10, January 2009. My mistake.
There you go.
I can't imagine writing a song, much less a song a day for, 11 years? Good grief.
And more importantly, doing anything once per day.
Yeah.
Like literally anything. Like, it's, especially if it's something that requires some kind of effort. Like, I suppose you all brush our teeth every day, but that is a lot less work than coming up with a new song, words, music, and recording it that has never existed before. And then the next day you got to do it again.
It seems even more like magic when you don't possess that skill up front. But yeah, even if I had to just post a tweet on Twitter every day, even that's the most nothingest nothing of all time. It's like the biggest thing that feels like something but isn't. Spoiler to all your Twitter protests out there, it's nothing. But that takes nothing at all. And yet doing that every day for 11 years, it would be nearly impossible.
Yeah. As somebody in the chat room just said, I'm not sure I poop every day. I think that's a pretty good summary.
At least not every day for 11 years.
You might want to get more fiber in your diet.
Oh, my word. All right, John, why don't you give us an update on Front and Center? You've been hot and heavy with the updates, my man. What's going on there?
Yeah, so first I'll start off by saying thanks to everybody who purchased Front and Center. I'm assuming it is only people who listen to the show because my experience has shown that no one who didn't listen to me explain at length what this thing does understands what it does, which is not their fault. It is it's a weird program that's hard to explain. Half of the difficulty of releasing this is trying to explain to people who are looking at it what it does so that if they decide that they think they want it and they get it, they won't be surprised by what it does or doesn't do. But anyway, it got a lot of press coverage on the first day from, all my friends. It was nice. I thank all of them for that. And as you would expect for an application like this, which is, like I said, probably the most trivial application that could actually exist on the App Store and not get rejected, that one day of coverage resulted in the vast majority of its sales. Again, thank you to everybody who bought it. And then, the sales dropped off to nothing. And so my plan has always been, as I discussed, to eventually raise the price from $2.99 in my deterrence pricing strategy, mostly because I just don't, after sales drop to zero, I don't want anyone accidentally buying it on an impulse and being disappointed because it's difficult to explain and people don't read text on the internet or in the App Store. They just see the icon and see some screenshots and think they know what it does, and then they get it, and then they're disappointed because it doesn't do what they want. So I want to keep those people away. I don't want people to buy it and be disappointed. So I raised the price, today. Today I raised the price from $2.99 to $4.99 to keep away the riffraff. And don't worry, this is not affecting sales because they'd already dropped to nothing, so it's not a big deal. But But still, it did much better than I thought. Obviously, the press coverage helped. Apple sponsored, Apple not sponsored, put it in their little like top or like their editorial section where it's like games that or apps that we love right now on the Mac App Store. So I'm very thankful for that. I got to look at the sales graph to see like the first day of coverage is like, 99% of the sales or 95% of the sales. Then the sales go down like a rocket. And then when Apple added it to the apps we love, there's a little tiny lump, which I appreciate. I appreciate that lump, Apple. Thank you so much for that lump because it's better than zero. But it just goes to show the Mac App Store is not a place where people visit every day, whereas, say, Daring Fireball is a place that people visit every day. So if you're featured in Daring Fireball, you will get way more sales than if you are featured on the Mac App Store in the Games We Love section. Or an ATP for that matter, because obviously us talking about it in the show really helped. And again, thank you to everyone who bought it.
You can buy sponsorships at atp.com/atp.fm/sponsorship.
It's not even, you got it wrong again. It's atp.fm/sponsor.
Oh, geez. I never go there. I never have to sponsor the show.
Yeah.
I can promote my stuff for free.
All right. Speaking of your stuff, have you bought a Mac Pro yet?
No. So last episode,
surprising.
Yeah, last episode, I had mentioned that I was having trouble with my iMac Pro for the first time ever. That I was getting noticeable fan noise when doing things that just heated up the CPUs a little bit, and that I had spent most of the last 2 years using this computer never hearing any bit of the fan at all. And I heard from a couple other people who had a similar problem, or had heard of other people having a similar problem. At the time, I thought, let me just try blowing out the computer. I assume it's dust that's impeding the thermals, and so I'll try blowing it out. So I brought it into the garage very carefully on my lap on the floor with an air compressor, and tried blowing it out. First, blowing out into the intake or into the exhaust, so it would like blow stuff out the intakes, and nothing really came out of it. And then I tried blowing into the intakes themselves at various angles, and a couple of very small pieces came out, but nowhere near what I was expecting. And then I vacuumed the intake holes to kind of finish up, but I obviously can't really tell what came out of that, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of dust in there. But I can tell you that before the cleaning, the idle temperature was about 10 degrees higher Celsius than after the cleaning.
Wow.
I did a quick little benchmark running Cinebench and looking at the fan RPMs over time. And the iMac Pro usually idles around 1100 RPM. That's when you basically can't hear the fan at all. Before the cleaning, it would be at 2400 RPM by about 45 seconds into Cinebench. And after the cleaning, 45 seconds in, it was still at the idle speed of 1100 RPM. And the highest it ever got before the cleaning was about 2,500. After the cleaning, the highest it got was 1,500. It took 68 seconds to get that high. And even that's only very slightly audible. So I consider it a success, even though it doesn't appear as though a lot of dust actually came out of it. But maybe I moved it around in there just enough. I don't know. Or maybe there was some dust in just the wrong place. I don't know. But whatever it is, it now is significantly better thermal performance, and it seems to be either back to normal or close enough to back to normal that I no longer notice it. So, success.
You know what you need on your computer, Marco?
Access to the inside.
Way bigger holes.
Yeah, honestly, yes.
And more of them.
Way bigger holes and more of them. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, definitely. While I did solve the problem, and while I do still love this computer, this moment did make me wish for a tower, so I could just because I have no real access to the insides of this thing unless I do heavy disassembly, like taking the screen off, which I'm not going to do. So I do wish at that moment I wish I had a Mac Pro instead, but that moment alone is not enough to make me actually ditch my setup and buy a Mac Pro.
Yeah, the Popular Mechanics article was talking about this, was exactly how widely spaced the heatsink fans are on the things in the Mac Pro. I mean, obviously the holes in the front are big, and we talked about them not having a dust screen because they want the fans to be able to run more smoothly and pull the air through. So very large holes in the front of it. Not difficult to get air through it, but then once the air gets into there, and I suspect this is what's going on inside your iMac, if there are any kind of heatsink fins, the closer those fins are together, the more able they are to trap dust and get clogged up. Like the fins are really far apart in the Mac Pro. I don't know if they're like a centimeter apart, but they look like you could fit a pencil between them. Like they're not like you'd expect heatsink fins to be, sort of stacked close together. And that's not like the previous Mac Pro or the Power Mac G305, which had very closely spaced fins, and which I often blew out with compressed air because they really did clog up. So I'm glad you use the Apple and in the 2010s and 2020 solution of compressed air to fix your computer.
Yeah, because like normally if you're designing a heatsink, normally you want as many very thinly spaced fins in the heatsink as possible, so you can get as much surface area as possible for the air to blow over, so it can cool as well as possible. And so normally you do design them really close together. And I don't know how much dust plays into the engineering of these things, but clearly on the new Mac Pro they thought of that. So you have these very widely spaced fins on these heatsinks that you do give up some density of surface area, although you also have a much longer path for the air to go through total, right?
Oh, that's why they can't do this in the iMac, is because the reason it works at all in the Mac Pro is they're like 8 inches long each fin, right? So you can get away with having fewer, but there's not a lot of room back there in the iMac. So just to get the enough surface area to cool things, maybe they need to have them more closely spaced. Or for all I know, maybe there aren't even any fins in there. It's all heat pipe stuff. I don't actually recall what's inside that thing. But the point is, there's not a lot of space in there, so your options are limited. They obviously did an amazing job on the cooling system, but it seems more vulnerable to dust. We'll see how this Mac Pro does. And how old is your thing? 3 years old now?
A little over 2.
And we'll check back in 2 years. Well, I can say that I did blow out dust from my 2008 Mac Pro, but never from the CPUs. I was always just blowing it off of my third-party video card that had its own GPU cooler that just made this terrible dusty mess in there. I never took compressed air to the CPUs, so I guess they survived dust. But it wasn't because there wasn't dust trapped in there. There's plenty of it. Like I said, the dust started to weld to the inside eventually. If you go to the attic and pull out my 2008 Mac Pro, you're like, oh, it looks dusty in there. And then you run your finger across it, and the dust doesn't move. It's just like textured metal now. Metal that has been textured with dust.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, man. Do you go up there and cuddle your old Mac Pro ever, or is it good riddance?
No, but I did. I send you a picture? I did refactor everything up there. I got rid of a lot of big boxes, rearranged stuff. We're still working on the attic. There's a whole other side that is a gigantic mess. Looks like a bomb went off, but my side is looking pretty good lately.
We are sponsored this week by HealthIQ. Now, you know what makes a healthy lifestyle. You can average 8 hours of sleep a night. You can eat a nice diet, probably a plant-based diet. You can exercise at least 4 times a week. You do these things, you're doing everything right to ensure that you live a long life. You also need to think about things like life insurance. And the problem is, historically, life insurance is overpriced for people who are healthy. HealthIQ uses science and data to secure lower rates for healthy people like you on life insurance. So, for example, if you're a runner or a cyclist, or you're into CrossFit, or you're another type of athlete, even if you're just a committed weekend warrior, if you're vegetarian or vegan, you deserve to be rewarded for your hard work with more affordable life insurance rates. HealthIQ is an agency. They're a life insurance agency. They can save you up to 41% on their life insurance because physically active people have significantly lower risks for things like heart disease, cancer, and diabetes that drive up life insurance prices. HealthIQ is not a lead generator. They take you through the entire process of applying, and the policy is underwritten by one of their top insurance partners. And these savings are exclusive to HealthIQ. You won't find them anywhere else, and you must qualify to get a special rate. To see if you qualify, go to healthiq.com/ATP to take the proprietary HealthIQ quiz. And your score, as well as other relating factors, might save you up to 41% on your life insurance premiums compared to other providers. Again, healthiq.com/ATP. Let them know we sent you, and start the process with the HealthIQ quiz. There's no commitment, and you'll learn even more about potential opportunities to be rewarded for your commitment to living healthy. One more time, healthiq.com/ATP. Thank you so much to HealthIQ for sponsoring our show.
There's been a big brouhaha this week about iCloud backups, encryption, and Apple, and whether they really give a darn about privacy or not. And as chief summarizer in chief, I will do my best to summarize. Gentlemen, please feel free to interrupt me if I go off the rails. There was a Reuters article just a couple of days ago saying in summary that Apple had planned to do end-to-end encrypted backups and then either pre-flighted it with the FBI or somehow got the FBI got wind of it, and the FBI unsurprisingly said, nope. And then Apple did an about-face. Now, what does encrypted end-to-end mean? What that means is if there's a backup of your phone that resides on Apple's servers but is encrypted from the time it leaves your phone, then, and I'm deeply oversimplifying to be clear, but anyways, if it's encrypted from the time it leaves your phone with keys that only you have, then that means Apple would not be able to, say, crack that backup open and send your iMessages to the FBI. Now, obviously, there's good and bad that comes of that. There's good in that that's hyper private. It's bad if you are a terrorist or do terrible things and should, be investigated for doing those terrible things. And there's a lot of different ways to look at this. There's a really good post on Stratechery this week, which I believe was the free post. If it was, I will put it in the show notes. But one way or another, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. But there was also a lot of debate as to whether or not Apple really acquiesced to the FBI, or if that story at Reuters was all kind of wrong and backwards. And there was a series of really good posts on Daring Fireball about this as well. Is that a reasonable summary? Again, I know I've oversimplified, but I'm trying to do this in less than 16 hours. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's close. I mean, I feel like the reason I put all the Daring Fireball links in there is I think Gruber did a good job of sort of trying to make sense of the various stories, all of which could be true at the same time, but not really getting the whole picture. In particular, I think his most salient point was like the idea that Apple would consider doing a thing, but then go and ask the FBI what they think. Like, not because his thing is that Apple wouldn't ask for permission, but it's because why bother? What the FBI's opinion is. You think the FBI's going to go, oh, no, you're good. Go ahead. Go do that. Like, you don't have to ask them to know. Law enforcement always wants access to this. There is no situation in which this topic would ever come up and their opinion would be different. So the idea of Apple bringing this information to them for their opinion or approval is completely ridiculous. That doesn't change the fact that Apple knows their opinion. The FBI probably expressed their opinion to Apple many, many times. That may have factored into Apple's decision. Now, the other articles that Guru put in here are about interviews with Tim Cook, some of them from years ago, discussing this very thing. It probably related to the previous security blow-ups and FBI asking for access to people's phones or whatever. And the suggestion was that, we're thinking about encrypting, doing end-to-end encryption for your backups. But one of the reasons, this is Apple speaking here, Tim Cook, one of the reasons I haven't been doing it is because, in case he didn't mention this, and I think this sounds like corporate BS, but it's actually probably a real thing, is that when people don't know their passwords and their data's gone and it's only in Apple's backups, if Apple couldn't give them their backups, people would be angry. Even if, as Gruber suggested, I'll just make it optional, like don't make it the default, but for people who care about security, like let them enable it. Everybody thinks they're not going to forget their password, right? Oh, yeah, I want the maximum security. And then they forget their password. And then, they want to get their data back and they go to an Apple store and they say, I don't remember my password. Can you just give me my data? They'll be like, sorry, we can't. Like you turned on super duper encryption. And the customers will be sad. Whether or not the customers are angry, some of them probably will be angry because people are people. But universally, they'll be sad. Oh, those are, I've lost all of my data. Like, and it's not really everything, because things like photo that appear on the web aren't part of this, because if there's a web page where you can go to view your photos and anybody can view them there, it's clear that Apple has the ability to decrypt them because they're showing them on a web page. But for other stuff, for your contacts, for your text messages, for your notes, for anything that Apple has on their server, any kind of data in any of your iOS applications, if it really was end-to-end encrypted, it would be a customer service and user experience negative, and only Apple knows the extent of that, because they know exactly how many times they end up with customers who don't remember their iCloud backup password and their phone fell in a lake and they want to get a new phone and they say, okay, where's all my data? They're like, oh, well, just log in with your Apple ID, and they're like, oh, I don't remember that. It's like, well, if Apple didn't have the ability to say no problem because you've been doing iCloud backups, we can get your data back for you. If they didn't have the ability to do that, customers would be sad. So I'm not sure what the solution here is. I think the whole government angle is mostly irrelevant because we know what the government's, we know what law enforcement's position is, and we know what Apple's position in general is. And I think one of the reasons that Apple's position is not hardline, like encrypt the entire world, is this customer service angle. The other side of it is also Apple's probably sick of legally fighting with FBI over this, and that is definitely a factor. But I think to frame it as Apple sacrificing your security to appease the government is a simplification. It is not factoring in, like I said, what sounds like corporate BS, but I think is a real thing. And the wild card in this, and Gruber also posted about this, is that Android, the world's most popular mobile operating system, or at least if you use Google services, Google does offer end-to-end encrypted backups. I'm sure the FBI hates that they do that too, but it's not as big a news story maybe because Apple's not involved or whatever. So I think eventually Apple will probably implement this somehow, some way, and at least give it as an option. But right now it's not. It hasn't been for years. If you're in the sort of security circles, this is not news. I think we talked about it on this show last time we talked about the FBI thing. The San Bernardino shooter FBI thing or whatever. The fact that the phones and the device is all encrypted and locked away, but if you've been doing iCloud backup, those are also encrypted, but Apple has the key and can give them to you. And the stats in the latest thing is like Apple does that thousands of times. Like law enforcement asks for backups and Apple gives it to them because they have like a warrant or whatever. Like they comply with the law because they have to. If Apple couldn't comply because they were encrypted, then they couldn't comply, and that would be a different story, and that's what they're fighting over. But, of the billions of Android phones, I'm not sure how many of them actually use Google services and use their backup services, so maybe it's a small portion. But anyway, it's a complicated topic, and the right thing to do is probably to offer end-to-end encryption, but I kind of understand why Apple has been waffling for so many years to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complicated topic in practice for so many reasons. And a lot of this goes back, like we were talking maybe a month or two back about the complexity of Apple dealing with China and other big world governments where they have to sell products, or they don't necessarily have to, but like they basically have to. And this has a lot of overlap with that, of like we're dealing with not just Apple's technical abilities, but we're dealing with Apple having potentially large clashes with the countries in which they need to sell phones and their own country that they are based in, because encryption is really tricky with law enforcement. And there's lots of different encryption laws all over the world with what kind of encryption is even legal in different parts of the world. There's always going to be this friction between the reality of encryption and law enforcement. Because, as John said, like law enforcement has a job to do. Their job is to allegedly solve crimes most of the time, and that is most of the time what they do. But they also have a culture of feeling entitled to everything, to any possible thing that might even lead to evidence, anything that might maybe contain a little bit of evidence, and they really, really feel entitled to look through your phone. As encryption gets better, their ability to do that is going down over time. As various security gets better, as security holes get patched, and hopefully not too many more made, it's getting harder for them to access what they consider evidence they are entitled to. And so, of course, they're going to go to the public. They're going to make a stink in public. They're going to try to scare people because throughout all of history, it's been a proven strategy that if you want people to give up their freedoms, scare them, and they will usually give them up more easily. And so they make all these crazy threats in public about how, you're enabling terrorists and all this stuff, or helping drug dealers, and they drum up these big, hefty terms and labels and scary things to try to make a public case, try to convince lawmakers maybe to change what the laws are. None of this has anything to do with the tech, really. It's all like political, and it's very hard for us as tech commentators to fully understand that world and to be able to really say like, they should definitely do this, or they should definitely not do this. Most of it goes way above our heads. Most of it is happening behind closed doors or as part of more complicated strategies that we aren't really thinking of or knowledgeable about. So it's so hard for us to say like, they should definitely offer full encryption, because if they do offer full encryption, they are taking a very big risk that will provoke the government into making full encryption illegal. And there's lots of reasons why we don't want that. Because keep in mind also, the legislators are not only people who are incredibly financially bought off for the most part, and the law enforcement complex is a very big complex in this country. So they're a very powerful lobby. it's also really bad politically to ever show yourself as being soft on crime at all. Just like another like hack that works with people is like you can't ever say as a politician that you're like being a little bit soft on what criminals can do. So the reality is we're at a very, very dangerous point where we're very close to this kind of encryption becoming illegal, and to even the U.S., the country that allegedly has freedoms, asterisk, 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 even we are probably very close to outlawing this kind of encryption at all, and to requiring companies like Apple to build in backdoors for our law enforcement agencies so they can spy on brown people when they cross the border. So it's so complicated. So I know that Apple usually has their head on straight with matters like this, even if they're doing things that we see as unpopular, or even when they're doing things that we see as capitulating unnecessarily to an oppressive government, whether it's somebody else's or ours. But in the long run, in retrospect, we can look back on what they've done, and usually we can say, okay, that was probably the right move at the time. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to stuff like this, most of the time, that if they've made a decision that doesn't seem quite right to me in this arena, in the area of like dealing with big governments, basically, they probably had good reason to do it, or they didn't have a choice. And we can complain all we want about that. We should, because the reality is our freedoms are getting eroded at an alarming rate. But that's not really Apple's fault. And there are much bigger issues in our own society and government that need to be addressed. That's where the real problem is. And if Apple is being forced to really toe a line here, it's probably not Apple's fault.
Are you just being an apologist?
Yeah, you know me. You know me. I'm known for never criticizing Apple.
Fair. I don't know. I'm like you said, it's so tough, and I'm so torn. And it turns out I was looking. The Stratechery piece is not free for this week, which is kind of too bad because it's a really, really good piece. And the gist of it, without doing near as good a job as Ben did, is that hey, there's many different ways to look at this, and there's compelling arguments on every side of it. Like, I could make a compelling argument that nobody should be able to use encryption in case you are doing something naughty, because I'm not doing anything naughty.
No, you couldn't. You could not make a compelling.
Well, okay. Well,
you could make a bad argument for that.
Fine. Just, you take my point. Is that, I can see reasons why one would desire for less encryption. I don't agree with them, but I can see the reasons why.
Terrible reasons, but yes. It's like Marco said, like he was saying fear, but it's like, appeal to emotion. All the logical fallacies you can think of are things that motivate people to argue for dumb things like no encryption anywhere, right? Right. But I think Marco was really getting to the heart of it. It's like it's doing something less than the absolute right thing as a long-term strategic play to prevent even worse things from happening. Which, unfortunately, in this country in particular, we're in a precarious situation. It's like you should really be playing the long game a little bit and saying, I can't make a moment-to-moment decision of always doing the right thing, because it has a high chance of triggering a much worse calamity in the very near future if I do. Like, in some respects, when/if our actual United States government was functioning in a reasonable way, each of the sort of parties involved in any sort of governmental issue should be, and it's like the pro workflow group in Apple, should be lobbying from their position. Law enforcement should be doing everything they can to get every scrap of evidence. That's their job. They should try as hard as they can within the bounds of the law. They're always going to want more data. They're always going to want that, but that is their interest. Like, that's what they're supposed to do. There has to be a countervailing force, which is, okay, on the other hand, people have rights, and they elect representatives to protect those rights. So as strongly as law enforcement tries to get all the data and personal information from people, equally strongly, our laws and representatives should be protecting the rights of the people from the overreach of law enforcement. That's how it's supposed to work. Like, two groups with different interests, like, coming together, balancing each other, checking each other's power, right? Right in this country right now, checking each other's power is not working quite the way it's supposed to. So we're in a dangerous situation where things could go downhill very fast. And so in this situation, and again, companies want to make as much money as they can, protect their data from the government, like be able to make a pitch like Apple saying, we are the privacy company, we'll protect your data because that helps them sell more devices and, whatever. Apple has interests as well. If Apple were to lobby as strong as possible for its interests, saying we are going to end encrypt the entire world and middle finger to the government, because the system of balances of the government itself is not in a healthy state right now, that could very easily tip things. And so I feel like, this is all more fear-mongering. Oh, if Apple end-to-end encrypts, that means they'll outlaw encryption. I don't think that's true at all, right? All I'm saying is that it's not a slam dunk to say, it's obvious Apple should just, say screw the government and encrypt everything immediately, right? Because there are potential consequences to that. And it's worth at least considering them. Now, I think my personal opinion is, yes, Apple should absolutely end-to-end encrypt everything. They should. The government will be mad. They should do it in a tactful way. They should have done it years ago. We shouldn't even be waiting. Google already did it. Apple should have already done it. That's my personal opinion. But I do understand at every point when Apple had to make that decision, thinking about, even if it was years ago, right? Thinking that, there's the customer service angle, and also as one of the sources in the routers, I would say routers. Reuters story said they didn't want to poke the bear. It's like, we just got through this big fight with the government. We do have to deal with the government. That's the worst corporate slime. It's like, oh, well, so you're going to screw your customers because you want an easier relationship with the government so you can make more money. That's mostly true, but there are other angles to that exact thing that I just said that are slightly more altruistic than the most cynical possible angle. So in this case, I think Apple did make the wrong call many times over and continues to make the wrong call, but not by a huge amount. Right. So I grow tired of people who are stridently who really believe that, companies like this or, whoever is in this kind of conflict with the government should always be taking the hardest of hardline positions. If you are 1 micron off of the absolute hardline position, you're dead to me. That is a more reasonable position to take when the system that we're all sort of playing in, the sort of the game rules and the sort of balance of powers and structure of the game rules is such that is a reasonable thing to do. But we are not anywhere close to that right now. And a hardline position in one or two areas can very quickly lead to worse things. And again, I don't want to be fear-mongering about that. I just think that's the thinking that is factored into Apple's decision to essentially do the wrong thing multiple times over by a small amount. And that's before even getting into okay, well then Apple has to sell products. Apple does sell products across the entire world, and everyone else has different encryption laws. And how do you deal with that? It's complicated. It makes you not want to be the CEO of Apple. Setting aside having to stand next to Trump at a Mac Pro factory, and this is a depressing episode. Who put this topic in the notes?
Yeah, and I have much more of a problem with that Mac Pro factory thing than I do, and the whole thing with the tariffs. It's one thing if Apple's trying to just make more money off of tariff BS,
or not pay as much taxes.
Yeah, I have absolutely zero respect for Tim Cook on those fronts, none whatsoever. But when it comes to standing ground on things like privacy and encryption, he's doing a pretty good job. And so when it comes to stuff like this, I do have to give him the benefit of the doubt that, yeah, if it's about tariffs and ways that Apple can either cheat the tax system to make more money, even though I know cheat is a loaded word because it's what all corporations do, but if Apple can, loophole the tax system to make more money or avoid tariffs that many other companies have to pay, that's just slimy. And I have zero respect for how much effort Tim Cook seems to be putting into things like that. But privacy stuff, it's pretty solid, and I do give him credit for having a lot of credibility on that front. They probably have their reasons for the decisions they make or don't make around encryption and privacy and the way it interacts with governments. I would also say, we're focusing a lot on the government angle here. Don't forget the customer service angle on this as well, because I think that's bigger than people realize. People do forget their passwords all the time and need Apple's help to get back into their stuff all the time. And as we lock down security better with things like two-factor and end-to-end encryption, we do cut off avenues for people to have a way out. And we try to tell people, okay, here's some recovery codes, or have iCloud recovery enabled for certain things, whatever. But the reality is, we've heard from people who work in Apple stores all the time that it's heartbreaking how many people come in and cannot get their data recovered and lose their, pictures of their children or whatever because they forgot a password and they're locked out of everything in a way that Apple can't help them recover it. That happens all the time, every single day, probably in every Apple store in the world. And so,
indeed,
yeah, right. And so, like, that is such a huge factor. It wouldn't surprise me if that's a major factor in Apple decision making in this area, just to leave them an out. Because if they didn't have that out, how many more people every day would have that horrible outcome?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I actually finally got around to replacing my iPhone 11 Pro that, if you recall, I shattered within like 12 hours of receiving it. And I was at the Genius Bar, was it Tuesday, I believe, and I was kind of listening to what was going on as I was waiting for a restore to go onto the phone and just generally killing time. And I even spoke to the genius I was working with, and, the genius I was working with, they had said that, this happens a lot. Because I'd asked, do you have to break hearts often? And I forget it. I don't think I phrased it in that way, but basically, how often do you have to deal with people who have lost their photos forever? And the genius said, it happens a lot, and it breaks my heart every time. And this is why I constantly tell people, you got to have backups, you got to have backups. And said the genius, and, as I'm watching the different discussions happen around me, it was clear that pretty much nobody that was there was excited to be there, which isn't really surprising. But at least half, if not 3/4 of the people that I saw were dealing with potential data loss problems, and they were devastated because of it. And I don't know, I didn't hear any like specific sob stories about wedding pictures or baby pictures or anything like that, but it's not a hard thing to imagine. And yeah, I think you're exactly right, Marco, that I would be stunned if Apple made this end-to-end encryption the default. If it happens at all, I would be stunned if they made it the default for exactly that reason, for customer service reasons, because that leaves all of the responsibility of the customer. And when you're a company as big as Apple, I would wager that a lot of your customers are probably not as, I'm trying to find a word better than smart, responsible as they should be.
No, I mean, it's not, and it isn't about intelligence. It's like people screw up. No one's perfect. Like, we screw up too. Everyone screws up. And it's nice when you screw up really badly. It's nice when somebody can come in and save your ass.
Yep.
And if you don't leave a way for that to happen, you're playing with fire.
And if you have security concerns, like even with Apple's stuff in its current state, you just, don't do iCloud backup. Like, you can turn off iCloud backup, and then your device will be your device, and it will be the only place where your stuff is, unless you back up locally to your computer, which you can still do in Catalina through the Finder, and yada, yada. Like, if you are super security conscious, Apple still does give you the tools to do what you want. But I think, and speaking of customers being sad at the Apple Store because they lost their stuff, the introduction of iCloud backups made that better, both because people had the ability to have their pictures someplace other than just on their phone, which was a failure mode before iCloud backup, where someone would be like, oh, my phone broke. Well, where are my pictures? Well, can you get them off the phone? It's like, the broken phone? The phone in the bottom of the lake? Not really. All right, so introducing iCloud backup really helped with that, because it would put them on a server. And for the people who did remember the passwords, you could just get them off the server. If you don't remember your passwords, Apple could still get them off the server because they had the ability to decrypt it because they had the key for it or whatever. But if Apple really wants to make fewer sad customers, we've talked about this a million times, more space for iCloud backups. I don't know how many people who say, like, I don't want to enable iCloud backups because it'll fill up because I have too many photos or whatever. It's like, yeah. And I was like, well, just pay a couple bucks a month. People don't want to pay for backup space. So fewer people do iCloud backups. Therefore, more people have the potential to lose data if they drop their phone in a lake because it isn't backed up, independent of remembering or forgetting your password. But, anyway, like I said, I think Apple absolutely should introduce end-to-end encryption for iCloud backups, if only as an option, and I think they will eventually. It's just a matter of time.
We are sponsored this week by Clear, the best way to get through airport security. Clear makes your life safer, simpler, and more secure. With Clear, your eyes and your fingertips get you through security faster at airports, stadiums, and other venues. So you never need to run to your gate again. Clear helps you get through security with a tap of a finger so you can get to your gate faster and reduce that pre-flight stress. You are your ID with Clear. Clear replaces the need for physical ID cards, using your eyes and fingertips to get you through security because you are the best ID out there. And it's super easy to sign up. You can create your account online before going to the airport. Once you get to the airport, a Clear ambassador will help you finish the process, and then you can immediately use it. And Clear helps you get through security faster in 65-plus airports and sports stadiums across the country, with more being added every day. And there's also family plans. Up to 3 family members can be added at a discounted rate at your existing account, and kids under 18 are free when traveling with a Clear member. So Clear is the absolute best way to get through airport security. And it works great with TSA PreCheck too. Right now, listeners of this show can get your first 2 months of Clear for free by going to clearme.com/accidentaltech and using code accidentaltech. That's clearme.com/accidentaltech, code accidentaltech for your free 2 months of Clear. Thank you so much to Clear for sponsoring our show.
You know, one of my favorite things to see in the show notes is something that I don't entirely understand, but I know there's a good story. And the next line item in the show notes is as follows, quote, Xcode layout hell, end quote. John, I presume this is you, and you've had some bad experience with Xcode.
Yeah, this is a sort of companion to my, just follow-up item about how Front Center was doing. So I have been in Xcode doing development. I've done 10 releases of Front Center in the past 2 weeks, which is too many.
Yeah, that's all going through the App Store?
Yeah.
Wow.
The Mac App Store has not a lot of traffic going on. They just things sailed through. Although the very last update did take several days, and then the very last update took like 48 hours to propagate too, so it was really long. All right, so I always keep thinking like, oh, maybe they do, that thing to do, lots of companies do this where like your first widget from the widget company comes through really fast to make you have a good impression of the company, right? Like they prioritize new customers on their first widget or whatever their thing is. They're always like, oh, well, probably on your first submission to the App Store, you jump to the front of the queue, so you have a positive thing. But then as I did my second and third, I'm like, well, am I eventually going to get like throttled? Like, am I going to get on a blacklist? Like, this guy puts out a new release every day. Put him at the back of the queue. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think I praised it in the last episode, but my review times have continued to be very good. Granted, my app is incredibly simple, all right? So it's not requiring lots of deep scholarship to figure out whether it should be approved or not. But the review times have been fast. Anyway, I put out 10 releases. That's too many. Again, more rookie mistakes. Hey, how about you just get it right before you put it out? I know. But part of it is mindset. Having never put in anything on an app store that's mediated by a company before, I'm in the mindset of like, I'm a server-side developer. You can deploy 5 times a day. Like, it's just, I'm just used to the idea of sort of iterative development. And of course, it can always be a little bit better. And as soon as you have an improvement, you put out that small improvement to, because why sit on that small improvement? Well, the reason you sit on it is because app review takes a long time. And if you spend your whole time waiting for app review, Anyway, I need to get in a different mindset for doing things through the App Store and just chill a little bit. Work more on the thing before I release the first version, and then maybe batch the updates in more way. It's difficult because like the first ones, there's a bunch of bug reports and things that are critical to get out and stuff like that. But anyway, all this is to say I've been spending a lot of time in Xcode, and this is the first time I've actually sort of used Xcode in anger to do anything real under any kind of pressure of like, oh, there's a bug, I need to get it fixed and figure out so on and so forth. And surprisingly, of all the sort of new experiences of using sort of modern Xcode, where the last time I used it, Interface Builder was separate, and then maybe the last time I used it before that, it was called Project Builder.
Yeah.
There's the Swift stuff, and we talked about that before. But like, of all the things I didn't think would be drive me nuts, it is laying out the controls in my one stupid window, my dinky little application. It's like a couple of pop-up menus, labels, checkboxes, and some text. Like, that's it. And having played with Xcode before and played with Interface Builder and seen a million WWDC things like, you just drag the controls out of the cool little palette and there's all sort of grids and snapping and it'll just put them into your view and you're good to go. That has not been my experience of using Xcode. Like, the layout I want to achieve, I feel like I could achieve more easily in Photoshop or Illustrator than I can in Xcode. Part of it is the lack of zoom, which I already complained about. Because there's little tiny retina pixels and there's no way to actually zoom in the Xcode interface builder thingy on the Mac. Apparently in iOS you can zoom, but not on the Mac. So I've been using the screen zoom, sort of control mouse wheel or whatever, but that just makes the pixels a little chunky or whatever. But really, it's like Apple has I'm sifting through the rubble of every layout system that Apple has introduced over the past several years, and they're all available at the same time, and you can mix them together, which you should not do. So it took me a while to learn that lesson. Like, do not mix springs and struts and auto layout because you'll drive yourself insane. The idea of a WYSIWYG editor, hey, just put the controls where you want in the window, right? And then you run the application and your controls are all over the place. It's like, what's the point of WYSIWYG if the control's going to shoot off into some other direction? Like, it's not there in the thing. Like, it's just driving me insane. And then once I eventually resigned myself to say, look, stop trying to be fancy. The old ways are best. This window is not resizable. Pixel perfectly place every control and just never have it move. Even doing that is driving me insane because, like, oh, what if you want to add another control? Well, I'll just make the window taller and put the new control. Oh, when I do the thing, auto or resize the subviews is on somewhere because it's dragging something down. I got to hunt through the thing and turn off all the springs and struts and everything. And then I'm in there trying to line stuff up. There are guides in Xcode, but there's also grid snapping and there's also guide snapping and there's also snapping to controls. Trying to give you the proper spacing between things, trying to let you align the baselines of text, but then being off by like a half a point, right? Like 1 retina pixel. And then I got to go in there and put fractional numbers in the positions in the text fields, 10.5 instead of 10 because they're not lined up, even though the guide snapping says they're going to be. It's like, oh my God, this should be so much easier. Like, this should be like a grid. It should be like snap, 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 snap. Like, everything should be just chunky, gigantic 16 by 16 point grids or whatever. It should be impossible for things to be off by 1 pixel. But it's not only is it not impossible, it's practically impossible not to have things off by 1 or 2 pixels. And I just want to do things like, I want this to be the same distance as that. Like, I wish I was in OmniGraffle. I wish I was in Photoshop. I wish I was in Illustrator. I wish I was in any other application that lets me put things on a canvas and align them in some sane way, other than this hell that is Xcode's interface builder. This is one window, one tiny little step. Now, granted, I'm terrible at this. I'm bad at this. I'm a beginner. I'm a novice. I don't know what I'm doing. I have fundamental misunderstandings of how things are supposed to work. But I'm not entirely ignorant. And I feel like the thing I'm trying to do, getting back to the Swift thing, easy things should be easy. What I'm doing is an easy thing. This is not a fancy program. It's got one stupid window with some controls in it. It should be so easy to do the right thing and get a correctly laid out window there. There are places where you have to make decisions about, subjective aesthetic decisions or whatever, but in general, it should be impossible to have things like 1 pixel off misaligned because you sneezed when you were trying to move something. So I am really struggling with that, struggling to the point where I've got Xscope, which by the way is an amazing application from Icon Factory that lets you sort of overlay on your screen rulers and guides and, frames and all sorts of other things. I'm there zoomed in with Xscope, lining up every single thing by single retina pixels, making sure, okay, I'm going to send this to the App Store. Are all the freaking colons lined up on my labels? Oh, that one moved the hairline. I got to move it back. Are the baselines all in a text aligned? Oh, this one's aligned, but that one's not. How is that possible? Are these things exactly this number of points away from each other? How many points is it supposed to be? I don't know, but when I drag it, I see the little guide, and it snaps to that. But sometimes it doesn't show the guide. So when it doesn't show the guide, I have to measure the other gap and say, if the guide was visible, it should be this far apart. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 retina pixels. Let me move it 8 retina pixels down here. Oh, you can't use the arrow keys for that because it doesn't do the half pixel. It's driving me insane. I don't know how anybody does any substantial application with Xcode interface builder. And the answer is, of course, you can just do it all in code and then you put the exact values in. Why are you bothering with a GUI builder? And I tried that approach for a few things. Like I've tried a lot of things. A spoiler for the future, I'm already working on my next application and I'm using Swift UI. And so I tried doing it programmatically. I tried doing it with auto layout. I tried doing it with springs and struts, trying doing it with Swift UI. I'm sampling everything to see if anything is easier. But thus far, again, caveat, I'm bad at this. I'm a beginner. I don't know what I'm doing. But it should be easier to do these simple things. And so my overall thing is I was surprised that this is the thing of all the things about making an app. And App Store Review and Swift and all the APIs and of all the stuff. It is laying out the minuscule GUI in my tiny trivial applications that's driving me up a wall.
I'm so sorry.
I hate to tell you, but it doesn't actually get easier the more experience you have.
You're like the opposite of the ad campaign in Marco Arman. It doesn't get better.
No, it really, when it comes to using Apple's various layout systems to try to make correctly looking interfaces without that much effort, it actually doesn't get better. You just trade in one hell for a different hell.
But I'm not doing anything fancy. I have no custom controls.
Yeah, but it isn't about that even. Like custom controls don't actually make it that much harder. It's like you have a tremendous amount of legacy, you have a tremendous amount of complexity, and you have UIs that are used by people who are mostly experts in them, and therefore, or rather, they are designed by people who are mostly experts in them. And so it's very unintuitive to beginners, first of all, as you have found already. But auto layout is extremely complicated. The interface for making auto layout constraints and dealing with them in Xcode is hilariously obtuse. Although, so is the rest of Interface Builder, and I don't know.
Don't even try to object to that. Like, I know how to use the GUI now. I know how to use it. The auto layout itself is inscrutable, but the UI for doing it can be figured out. It's just not obvious, but it is not good UI.
Yeah, so there's all that, right? Then you also have the problems of, first of all, you have these many different systems that all have different behavior. So you have the old, auto resizing mask springs and struts system. Then you have auto layout. Then now you're doing Swift UI, which is its own brand new thing, which is both completely different and also incredibly immature still. So you have many different problems that you're like juggling between these three different systems. None of them are great, and people have such different opinions that, like, whatever I think or Casey thinks is probably going to be different than what you think, John. Like for me, I do everything in code for the most part. That's not great either. It just has downsides that I'm willing to tolerate more than the alternatives' downsides.
Yeah, see, I feel like let me start by saying I've never done anything never written anything for the Mac, so I can't speak to your particular foibles when it comes to writing Mac OS software. But like Vignette uses storyboards, and I've survived. Like, it's fine. I use auto layout, and it mostly works just fine. And yeah, I mean, auto layout's weird, man. It really is, but I don't think it's entirely inscrutable. As with all things Apple lately, like the documentation is hot garbage and it's very unapproachable. I don't think it's inscrutable though. And I agree that Interface Builder is very, obviously it's not Interface Builder anymore, but laying out an iOS app is very weird. I wouldn't say it's hard necessarily, but it's very, very weird. And the way that IB does things is very unlike any other visual sort of designer I've used in the past. And there are definitely times that things are hard to understand, or I get error messages that I can't really make heads or tails of. Like, those things all do exist. I'm not saying you're completely wrong or full of crap. Like, your lived experience is factually your lived experience. But I get the feeling, up until what Marco said just a moment ago, I get the feeling that you're both saying that IB is hot garbage and is unusable. And I don't think that's really the case. It's got its own set of trade-offs. And Marco, I like what you said a moment ago about how, you do everything in code, but that also does indeed have its own set of trade-offs. And that's fine. Like, if that works for you, man, then stick to it. You don't need my permission to keep doing that. And you certainly don't need me guilting you into using IB. For me, I like laying out these things visually, and it's easier for me to reason about it visually than to do it in code. And I've also found that IB is much easier to tolerate when you either have a extremely small team or a team of one. And so, like when we were at work, when I was at work, when I had an actual real job, I eventually got to the point that we were passing around some sort of trinket, I forget what it was, to kind of claim who was using the storyboard or whatever, nib at the time, which is absolutely barbaric. I mean, it was like using exclusive checkouts in Perforce way back in the day, which is also barbaric, if you ask me. But that's what we needed to do. So yeah, I'm not saying Interface Builder is perfect, but I also don't think that it's a complete, utter disaster, at least with iOS. Again, I'm not trying to argue with you, John, about macOS. macOS may indeed be that bad of a disaster, but on iOS, I mean, it works for me. It's not perfect, but it works for me. I mean, it's not completely worthless.
I think iOS has it a lot easier.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. It is significantly harder to make a well-laid out interface on the Mac than it is on iOS, because for lots of reasons. I mean, the Mac is just more complicated. There's way more UI usually to a Mac app. Like, iOS apps tend to have significantly less UI. There are fewer standards that you're supposed to comply with on iOS. Making a Mac app is or making a great Mac UI is significantly harder than a great iOS UI.
Or even just a reasonable looking Mac UI. Like, here's the thing about the Mac versus iOS. On the Mac, you have this giant blank canvas that is a window that can be any size, any shape, and you can put a billion things on them, and you can put them anywhere. Like, there's really no precedent for that in iOS, because in general in iOS, first of all, you're usually full screen or half screen or quarter screen or whatever, and you're using controls and things that essentially define bounding boxes for themselves. You've got a table view. A table view has rows. Within the row, maybe you have some freedom to lay things out, but there's like a thing on the right and a thing on the left, and you can align them and you can have padding, and that's about it. And that is incredibly constrained compared to, here's a gigantic gray window, throw these 900 controls on them. And that's where you really need the tool to help you. All right, what should the margins be on this window? How far away should a label be from its pop-up menu? How wide should the pop-up menus be? How much space should there be between them? If you have to group them, how should you group them? Should you group them with white space? Should you group them with a bounding box? If you make a bounding box, does everything get nested in that view? Or it should not be nested in that view? Once they're nested in multiple views, can you align things? And they're supposed to be aligned if you're in a good Mac design. Things in these little gray boxes should be aligned with each other, like the labels should all line up, but you can't actually align them with the tool because you can't command click or shift click items that are in different bounded views. So you can take them out of the views, but then every time you try to move them, they re-nest themselves into the views. Like, the tools are not helping, and you really need help from the tools because you don't have help from the controls themselves. They're not things nested inside each other, and they don't tend to go from edge to edge and define sort of regions or whatever. I'm not saying that iOS designed it easy, because iOS has its own weird set of problems with device orientation changes and different sizes and things you can't control or whatever, but in general, the controls on the Mac, it's like just a bunch of Legos, and you just dump them out onto a carpet. It's like, make sense of that. And that, like I said, that's where you really need the tools to help you. And the tools aren't really fighting me, but they're not doing me any favors. That's why I'm using accessibility, the screen zoom and Xscope to get in there and zoom. And again, if I've heard that in storyboards on iOS, you can actually zoom in Xcode itself, which would really help when you're trying to get things lined up. But even with that zoom, like I said, with the grouping, that's a real thing that I'm doing. Like, because even in my Swift UI app, I have other windows that I was starting to do in Swift UI. I was like, how the hell do you do regular controls in Swift UI? And I was like, I'll just do this one the old-fashioned way. So I have Swift UI and a storyboard in this new application. And for the storyboard-based view, I do actually have a bunch of controls that I decided to group with sort of, I don't know what they're called, but like these boxes, these little sort of recessed darker gray regions that you're familiar with on the Mac. Like if you go into, I'm looking at it right now in System Preferences in the Extensions pane, there's a sort of source list on the left that's like a table view, a scrolling table view. On the right, there's a detail view, and that's sort of recessed in a little well. And I wanted to group the controls in those boxes. But once you do that, you can't use the alignment tools in Xcode to align things across those boxes. So you have to use a guide. But then when you put the guide in, how do you place the guide so that it is correctly positioned so that the thing you already know you snap to the right distance from the field, like how do you place the guide so that it is in place with the first set of items? Because you can put the guide and eyeball it, but then when you try to move the thing, you're like, oh, actually, that guide is 1 pixel off where it's supposed to be because the thing just moved and it shouldn't have moved because it was already aligned. It's not helping me as much as I feel like it could. That's all I'm saying.
I think in many ways, if it goes the way it's, I think, supposed to, according to plan, Swift UI should really help this.
Oh, I have a whole other show about Swift UI, let me tell you.
I'm ready. My body is ready. Let's do it.
It should, in theory, provide more like standard groupings, standard layouts for controls across the platforms, including the Mac. And because that I think is what we're really lacking is like, as you mentioned, like the controls basically doing a lot of this work themselves. With Swift UI, if it fulfills the promise, I think you should have significantly less of this work to do manually. That being said, that's a really big if.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into all the Swift UI thing now, but if you go to my website, go to hypercritical.co and look at, I keep updating, as I release new versions of Front and Center, I keep updating the screenshot on the website. So it keeps, being, anyway, the screenshot you see there is the current version. So look at that dialogue, right? Or you can just launch Front and Center, which I know you're all running, and check the preferences, right? Yeah.
I bought it, but I am not running it normally.
Yeah. Anyway, if you look at this and think about what Marco just said about Swift UI, like that these controls come with canned metrics and that there's some cross-platform nature where it'll put the right control for the right thing. There's nothing, as far as I'm aware so far, in SwiftUI that would help with a window like this? Because this window, I think, is, I mean, it's not perfect. It's not great. It's overwhelming because I had to have all this explanatory text. That's the fault of my application. It's not the fault of Xcode, right? It's me making an application that's hard to explain, so I got to be all wordy. Anyway, but set that aside. Just imagine it was 2 tabs, 2 pop-up menus, 4 checkboxes. Like, forget about all the other crap. SwiftUI doesn't give you anything that will help you lay out these controls in a Mac-like way, because there's 17 Mac-like ways you can lay out these controls. And the one I've chosen is partly, like, this is part of the things in Mac. It's partly aesthetics. It's partly, like, artistry, which sounds highfalutin, but it's like, there are tons of different ways to do it. You are sort of expressing the personality of your application, and by extension yourself, in what you decide to do. There is no generic standard way to lay out these controls, because they're not just controls. They have semantics in your application. So you have to sort of try to provide some kind of visual hierarchy that expresses the meaning of the controls to the user. I don't think that, not only do I not think SwiftUI would help me lay out this dialogue, I don't think I could lay it out in this way with SwiftUI without a ton of work. Because I'm using SwiftUI in my new app for, I think, what its strengths are. Like, when you use SwiftUI, it's a lot like doing web development, right? It feels more like that. It feels like using CSS, right? Because right down to, like, dot padding or whatever, and then alignments and HStacks and VStacks, and it is very much like doing web work, where in the web in general you sort of define these regions and then you style them, and it's HStacks and VStacks and lists and text and whatever are like divs and all those other things, right? It's like you just tell me what the elements are, and then you can style them with some other, But that, like, if I had to make a web page that looked like this dialogue, it would also be a little bit tricky, because things really are sort of lined up down to the pixel based on spacing and visual weight. I mean, I'm not particularly happy with the result. It's too busy. I'm not sure about those lines. The spacing is a mess, but at this point, I just don't ever want to touch it again, because anytime I touch anything, everything just cascades into this giant mess and everything's misaligned, right? I'm terrified of this stupid thing. Like, for example, the space, see the interface and startup regions of checkboxes? I wanted them to be separate because they're kind of two separate things. One of them is about hiding and showing icons. The other one is like, what do I do when I start up? How much space should there be between those two sets of checkboxes? Does anybody know? I can tell you for a fact, Xcode sure as hell doesn't know, because it does not give you any guides. Like, if you want to have a space there, how much space do you want? You can choose it down to the retina pixel. How much space do you want? God forbid you have multiple groups, because then they should all be spaced by the same amount. Can you do that in Xcode? Have fun zooming in and trying to make sure they're the same space. Like, the tools for sort of laying out groups of, like, this is not, doesn't do it for you. You got to do this yourself down to the pixel. And again, with SwiftUI doing it, if you, like, I spent a lot of time wandering through the preferences dialogues of, like, every application on my Mac, third party and first party. There is a huge variety out there. Like, it is, and again, like I said, it's the expression of the personality of the application that comes through in the way they lay out their preferences. And sometimes you can look at it by age. Like, if you go through system preferences, you're like, you can date them by, like, oh, I remember when this was the way we used to do Mac UIs. Like, this hasn't been touched in 5 years. This hasn't touched in 7 years. It's, you can really feel that if you're familiar with the way things are done. But then you're like, all right, well, how should I be doing it now? And that's kind of like asking the question of, like, what kind of song should I be making now? What's good music now? It's like, well, that's up to you to do. Like, there is no, like, I just want to know how to make a song. Like, how are people making songs today? Like, the same thing with apps, right? I just feel like the tools should at least sort of help you sort of align your, I'm trying to give an audio analogy, to align all of your various tracks in Logic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Logic doesn't make the song for you, but it makes it easy to have multiple tracks and cut and remove things from them and align them up. And, like, I'm hoping I don't have much experience with Logic, but anyway, that's what you want the tool to do. The tool's not making the song for you, but the tool is letting you sort of know, like, can I make a 1 second gap between these things? And can it always be 1 second? Yeah, because the tool has a way for you to do that. It's a little bit different in that, there are standards for standard spacing of stuff. Like, for example, the distance that the label is from the checkbox. Xcode does that for me. I don't have to guess that, right? The distance from the label to the like the left side label. Xcode has a snap for that, but it has snaps all around there. And because you can't zoom, like, am I aligned with the baseline of the text or am I aligned with the bottom of the checkbox? They're about 1 pixel away from each other. Make sure you're aligned with the right one. It's just very sort of persnickety. So, I mean, this is all this to say is app development is hard. Surprise. Person who doesn't do app development finds it difficult. Surprise. Like, this is not, this is not a condemnation or anything other than just myself and my poor choices and not learning this stuff better before I started using it. But app development is hard, and I'm surprised. I mean, maybe I shouldn't be surprised because the programming part, I've been programming for 20 mumble years, right? That, programming is just programming, right? Finding the right APIs and fighting with sandboxing and stuff like that is a little bit tricky, but in the end, it's not much different than fighting with browser APIs and all the other stuff that I've done in my actual career. Like, programming is programming, but GUI stuff and having to use tools and having to decide, do I want to do it programmatically? Do I want to use Swift UI? Do I want to use auto layout? Do I want to use springs and struts? Do I want to throw up a web view? Like, people make all sorts of decisions in their applications for good or for ill. And so, I'm kind of, maybe I've gone off on the deep end where I have the ability to do all of those things badly, and I'm taking a tour of all of them and just finding all of the different ways they're all bad, or that I'm bad at them.
Well, it's like, as usual, the hardest problems in computer science are choosing your GUI framework, fighting your tools, and visual design.
So true. Speaking of visual design, why is there a crossfade between the two tabs?
And that is not, this is the great thing. Like, I get a lot of, having GUI apps and getting bug reports and not being able to actually communicate with your customers. One of the bug reports I got was, I click on the tab, like there's the general tab and the exclude tab. They said, I click on the tab and nothing happens. They didn't even say that. I click on the tab and it doesn't work, or something like that. It was very, as you'd imagine, very terse thing. Thing is, that tab view control, first of all, it's inscrutable to be able to, I didn't even go into this, but it's very difficult to get that to work. But that's a control. Like, you just make that and you add tabs to it. I have zero amount of code. I'm not controlling that. You can programmatically make that tab group and control it yourself, but I'm not. I'm using the widget from the little library in an interface builder. It does that. I can change the animation to be, on or off or whatever, but I've just left the default. So that fade you see is the default action. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, I didn't like, there's a checkbox to turn it off and there's like a pop-up menu to pick what kind of animation you want, but I'm pretty sure that's just the default. I sure as hell didn't seek it out and add it. So
I assumed you did seek it out and add it because I can't recall ever seeing this crossfade. I mean, I'm sure it exists somewhere, but I cannot recall ever seeing this crossfade anywhere.
Yeah, it's weird. But anyway, I'm not controlling that. So when they say, hey, I click on exclude and it doesn't work, it's like, but I didn't make that work. That's part of the control. But the thing that drives me nuts about this with storyboards is, so you've got the window in the storyboard, right? And then you've got the view, which is a second rectangle with a line coming from it in the storyboard view. And then you've got another line from that view box to the tab control, which shows the two tabs. And then you got two lines coming from that, one for the contents of the left tab and one and that's a lot of boxes for everything that's going to be a single window. And the thing that was driving me nuts is when I click from the left tab to the right tab, I don't want anything to move. In particular, I don't want the tabs that I just clicked on to move. So you have to make the views so they exactly fit in the same size box so that when you switch from one tab to the other, the tabs don't move, and the darker gray rectangle, the inset thing, also doesn't move when you change tabs. I must have spent hours doing that, mostly because I didn't understand what is it that's determining the size of these things. You can control them down to the pixel in Xcode. I had them down to the pixel matching, but then I started measuring them when I ran it. I'm like, yeah, I have everything down to the pixel matching, but when I run it, it's like 3 pixels different. So what is determining the size? Again, this is just ignorance on my part. Like, but surprising to me that you would think, oh, see this window you see in the screenshot? That's exactly what you see in Xcode, right? Nope, that is not what I see in Xcode. What I see in Xcode is this big, giant, sprawling thing in storyboards with lines between them, and none of those boxes are the same size as the box you see on your screen right here. It's non-obvious to a beginner, let's say. Easy things should be easy. In Xcode, easy things are possible.
I think one of the bigger challenges also that you have here, which you were talking about earlier, is like you're trying to make, quote, like a correct looking Mac interface, basically. Like you're trying to make the right style, using the right spacing, using the right controls for things. But in practice, that is kind of poorly defined. Like on iOS, it's all over the place, but it always has been, so it's kind of okay. the Mac, I feel like Mac enthusiasts like us have this idea in our head of like what a Mac app should be, or what's like a good Mac app, or what's like a native Mac app style.
Like, what should a song sound like? That's the idea we have in our head. What should a song? We know it when we hear it. We know when we hear a good song. We know when we hear a bad song. We know when we hear an old song. We know when we hear a new song. But it's very difficult to say how do I make a song?
Right, and when it comes to like making a quote Mac-like Mac app, or like a native Mac app, we have this idea of like the kind of things it should have, the kind of way it should look, but all these little details, most of them are not codified anywhere. Most of them are not in the HIG. They're not like there's no standard. Everyone kind of just fuzzes around and does what they think might look right. And there's the secondary but significant problem of not only are the like number of developers who make good quality Mac apps seemingly pretty small, but that number seems to be going down over time, not up. And so you look around, like Apple can't make a great Mac app to save their lives anymore. And it's getting more and more rare to see it out of anybody else either. Meanwhile, you have a lot of Mac apps coming out that are just total random garbage, or just basically web apps that are wrapped in a UI or something like that just throw away any concept of there possibly being like a right way to do these things. Like of all the apps that we use every day, like how many of them are actually like quote good Mac apps? I bet all three of us have Skype open right now. At least two or three of us probably have Chrome open right now. We have Slack open. Like, it's like, how many of these apps have anywhere near what you would call a good Mac interface? Like, it's getting increasingly rare that like this is going to become one of those like lost skills that there's just very few people left not only doing this, but who even will know how to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's Mac-like, which, and you mentioned like that you don't have metrics for all this stuff, and the HIG just tells you vague stuff. But the original Aqua HIG had metrics for like everything, like down to the pixel, because that was before points and pixels. But it was very. I wish I could have an old copy of it. Maybe I do somewhere. But it would show you dialogues of like, this is how far the OK button needs to be from the left. This is how far it needs to be right. This is how wide it should be. This is how much white space there should be around the labels on buttons. This is how far the buttons should be from each other. Like, this is where the text should be. This is where the icon should be. It was like nailed down for the basics anyway, not for a complicated window like this. And I don't even think the original Aqua human interface guidelines told you how far apart the checkbox should be. And on a classic Mac OS, there were fewer controls and it was simpler. And your layout options were fewer, and they did define the metrics more precisely. But on the Mac today, there are the quote-unquote Mac-like Mac apps, which is just a totally drifting target, as you noted. But then there are other applications that bring their own thing, like Slack and other applications that say, we're quote-unquote native applications, but what we're basically bringing is a web-style UI. And the web has its own aesthetic, with which I am very familiar. And bringing that on the Mac doesn't feel Mac-like, but at least when I'm in those applications, I feel the groove of that song genre. I'm like, okay, you're a web UI. I get it. I use web UIs. Are you a good web UI or are you a bad web UI? I'm not confused into thinking you're a Mac UI, but you're like web-like. Things like Chrome are like, well, you're not really web-like. You're not really Mac-like. You're your own weird thing. And then there are things like, speaking of good Mac applications, all of us are probably running right now, Audio Hijack. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in the HIG that's going to let you make Audio Hijack. That's an example of saying we have a problem that we think we can solve with an interface that is undreamt of by Apple. And that's an example of, how do you write a song? Like, sometimes no one's giving you any guidance. You just got to make up your own thing. And if you do it really well, you get something like Audio Hijack, which we use and we would say feels quote-unquote Mac-like, but I don't know if there was any standard controls in the entire application, right? So it just goes to show that you don't have to use standard controls at standard spacing with standard fonts and all that other stuff to be Mac-like. Like, it really is more abstract than that. But I totally agree that I was, mentioning going through system preferences and being able to sort of date the time that UI was made by how it looks, right? That the modern face of like canonical Apple Mac applications or canonical Mac applications is that Apple hasn't been the standard bearer for that for years. Like, there are still great Mac apps. Like, I think Safari is great on the Mac, but that's not a new application. The new applications that we have recently are, stocks and voice memos and these Catalyst apps, and they are not good Mac applications. They're not good iOS applications. They're just not really good applications, period. Rewrites of existing applications. I think the Notes application is good, but it is more like Audio Hijack than it is like Safari in terms of making up its own UI. So really, like that center that used to be there, the sort of center of like Apple's bundled applications show you what a Mac app should be like. And they may be simple, text edit, mail, Safari, Finder, but here it is. And if you look at them all together, they have a family resemblance. They look like Mac apps, and they're kind of the standard. It's kind of like, if you made an iOS app in the old days with just Apple standard controls everywhere with the standard spacing and everything. You'd look at it and you say, well, it's not anything to look at, but I look at that and I know that is the beating heart of iOS, and then branch off from there. That doesn't really exist in the Mac anymore, and Apple is not doing anything to sort of bring it back. I think maybe the peak of that was like when Apple was making the iLife applications. Here's a suite of fairly complicated applications that take the standard Apple, take the standard Mac design flavor and riff on it a little bit, because they used custom controls and they used all sorts of weird stuff, but they defined a sort of, here's what Mac apps look like today. Even if it was, they're giant brush metal windows and have a bunch of glossy buttons on them. That was the thing for a while, and Apple had many examples of it. And if you wanted to make an application look Mac-like during that era, you could pull up every application in iLife, look at every single window, and just look at them and say, make something that looks like that, and you will fit it in on the Mac today. If you go to a modern Mac, there are no set of Apple applications that you can open and crib off of and make something that looks like the Mac. You'd open them and you'd be like, these are all made by the same company in the same decade? Like, seriously, go look at the preference dialog boxes from like 7 first-party applications from Apple and compare them to each other and see how wildly different they are. It's a little bit of the Wild West today. It's not to say there aren't good ones out there, but it's definitely the sort of the beating heart of Mac user interfaces. I'm not going to say it's exploded and spread all over the place, but it's hard to find, let's say.
Well, and I think that's the same problem Windows has had forever. Like, one of the reasons why Windows app UIs are all over the place, I mean, there's multiple causes for this, but one of the big reasons is that there was fairly weak leadership from Microsoft, from the platform vendor and the major application vendor. Like, there was fairly weak leadership from them on what a good interface for the platform is. And for a long time, Apple had really strong leadership in that area on their platform. And that's one of the reasons why third-party software on the Mac tended to be better than third-party software on Windows, or at least nicer. There was strong leadership and a strong concept of what is a good/correct Mac design to make. And now I think Apple has the exact same problem that Microsoft has had forever, which is like Apple itself is not providing strong leadership in that area anymore, and they haven't for a little while now, to the point where I said earlier, Apple can't design a Mac app to save their lives. Apple can't seem to design an app anymore to save their lives. Like, Apple seems to be really incapable of making good interfaces anymore. Whatever their current software design leadership and structure and variables, whatever goes into that. When's the last time Apple made a great UI? It's been a while. Like, there's a reason why most of our favorite products from Apple are things like AirPods that have no UI. They're just not making great UIs anymore. And they're really good at making junk drawer style things where like you just sweep everything off the table and you still have tons of complexity. It's just buried, and that they call that simplicity or minimalism or whatever. But like the apps are still horrendous to use. Things are still very unintuitive. There is no standard for anything anywhere. Different teams in the company that make different apps follow seemingly totally different UI conventions and standards, or no standards whatsoever. Music. So like there are so many just like random bad designs coming out of Apple these days. They are providing no leadership whatsoever anymore on what makes a good UI. And so we're going to have this problem. We have it on all their platforms where like the standards are fairly eroded or gone at this point, and we all are just kind of fending for ourselves, trying to figure out, is this good? Is this good? And every company has a different opinion of what that means.
I mean, I think it's mostly, like I said, mostly true for new apps. Because a lot of their existing apps, even existing apps that have been refreshed, like I said, notes before, reminders, there is a family resemblance to them, but they're not, to your point, they're not new apps. Like, whereas the new app that Apple came out with, here's this new application from Apple. Like, I mean, examples, I know they're Catalyst, but like setting as Catalyst aside, they made new apps that either came with the Mac or were purchased separately for doing stocks or podcasts or TV or voice memos or whatever. If those were just new applications from Apple, like we don't see that. We see, okay, well, you're continuing to refine Safari. And I think Safari is great. And if you want to look at a screen that has tons of complicated UI in it that Apple does a pretty good job of wrangling, the web inspector in Safari, they add features to it all the time. It's very complicated. It's a developer tool, and they do such a great job of taming that complexity in a reasonable Mac-like looking UI, right? And Notes and all these other applications that have the toolbar with the monochrome buttons and the title barless windows where the toolbar buttons are alongside the window widgets, like that's, if I had to try to pinpoint some kind of, faintly beating heart of modern first-party design, it would be to look at how Apple has redesigned a bunch of their bundled Mac applications to have this family resemblance. And then we can debate, like, the second thing is, okay, if that's where Mac design is at, supposedly, those 3 or 4 applications that have some kind of family resemblance that are trying to say this is what a Mac app should be like, then we can say, is that a good way to be? Again, getting back to brush metal. There was clearly a way that Apple was saying first-party apps should be. Was that a good way for them to be, or was that kind of not really, as timeless as they could have wanted it to be, right? I could, if I was, still writing Mac OS X reviews, I think I maybe did get into this when they first did the thing of like removing the title bar and merging it with the toolbar and doing transparency and the vibrancy layers and the sidebars and borderless windows and hiding the scroll bars and all that other stuff. Like lots of decisions that have been presented as Mac-like, new directions in Mac-like design, defining what it means to be the Mac, even when they've been very strong, sometimes haven't been the best decisions. Again, it's like the group of songs that you can tell are, made at a certain time and a certain moment in history and have a certain feel and are in a certain genre, but aren't great songs. So I do have some complaints about even the commonalities that I find in Mac UI, which is why I think like the standouts are, again, because I'm staring at it on my screen, like things like Audio Hijack, which are like, we are going in our own direction and we're just going to make a great UI, period. And it will feel Mac-like because the people who make it have the Mac in their bones and understand sort of the underlying ethos, but it doesn't have to actually use any standard controls, and it doesn't actually have to look like Safari or Notes or Reminders or Contacts or anything like that to be a good Mac app.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Clear, Casper, and HealthIQ, and we'll talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
We haven't done an Ask ATP in a couple episodes because we've been a little chatty, but there was a really, really, really fun one that we thought we'd do as like a neutral after show. And so Matt Rigby writes, if the ATP crew were to take a Top Gear style road trip in separate cars, which is probably the only way we could survive, what 3 cars would you choose for something along the lines of a cross-country trip? Like, so the implication that Matt is getting at here, I think, is that this isn't like, down the road or anything like that. The 3 of us are driving in separate vehicles easily halfway across the country. Now, I have an answer, which I like my answer. I'm not overjoyed with it. Would you like me to tip my hat and just start, or would one of you prefer to go first?
Is it a Jeep Wrangler?
No, it is not a Jeep Wrangler. Oh, that's an interesting thought, but no.
It should be as punishment for thinking about buying one.
Can you imagine? Is there a worse punishment than being forced to drive a Jeep Wrangler for like how wide is the country? Like 5,000 miles?
You don't know what animals look like or how big the country is. That's good.
So wasn't just recently that
how much could a banana cost?
Wasn't it just recently that there was a new Cannonball Run record of like 24 hours or something like that? It was preposterous. Whatever the answer was.
Yeah, they broke the record that was made and widely publicized on the internet like 5 or 10 years ago. I forget what the new time is, though. But yeah, it was broken by a lot.
Yeah, because Alex Roy did it, and that was like the
32 hours or
something like that. It was in the M5 too, and it was the it will never be beat time. And then like a couple of years ago, that got beat, and then I think just in the last 6 months to a year, there was another new record. Preposterous, I tell you. All right, well, since I'll just go ahead and go first, since none of you seem over enthusiastic. So I was thinking to myself, all right, I'm going to be in the car for a very long time. I'm going to want a car that probably can do a fair amount of self-driving, but I don't want an electric car because I don't want to have to stop all the time to charge.
Can you back up a little bit? You're going to want a car that can do a fair amount of self-driving. Could you please unpack that statement for me?
So there are degrees of like self-drivingness. So for example, my Golf R, it will ping pong inside of the edges of a lane if I just let my hand off the wheel, which I would never do. I'm just saying, like, it is capable of keeping me in a lane.
That sounds
and it
terrible.
will get very angry about it. Oh, it's a terrible approach. Like, I would never rely on it. I'm just saying, strictly speaking, it would keep me in a lane if I really, really, really needed it to. Boinging between the two dividing lines. That's not really self-driving. Aaron's car does a fairly decent job, at least on the highway anyway, of full-on self-driving. Like, you have to keep your hands on the wheel, just like on a Tesla usually, and it'll actually, stay dead center in the lane. It'll follow appropriately if people in front of you slow down, and it'll speed up again if they speed up, et cetera, et cetera. And then, to me, I actually think the best self-driving that I'm aware of is the Tesla. And as much as I love to poke fun at Teslas, their self-driving suite, for lack of a better word, is really and truly incredible. So I would want something that's along the lines of Tesla's self-driving capabilities, but I don't personally want to do this hypothetical trip in a Tesla. Is that fair, John?
Go on, you can continue. Yeah.
Okay. So I want a gasoline/petrol powered car. I didn't even think about diesel, but I don't think I want that, especially since in America it's not as prevalent as it is elsewhere.
The kids will do the thing where they pull their arm down. They want you to honk the horn.
I wonder if that happens in other countries. But anyway, so I want a sedan. I don't think I want a coupe, although a coupe is an acceptable answer, I suppose. I want a luxury barge is what I want. And the obvious answer to this question is some sort of ridiculous S-Class. But now, to be fair, I haven't driven a modern Mercedes, really in probably 10 plus years. But I returned to Old Faithful, which is really Old Unfaithful, actually. I returned to BMW, and I thought to myself, well, what would I get from BMW? And so this has actually been in the show notes for several weeks. And so several weeks ago, I actually built myself a 2020 750i xDrive sedan with, of course, the M Sport package. This is 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds in a sedan that's probably as long as my house and weighs about twice as much. And the MSRP as built, and we will put a link to my build in the show notes, $111,500 for this 750i xDrive sedan. So again, my theory is this will kind of self-drive to at least some degree. It will be comfortable. It is large, plenty of room for whatever luggage I might want to bring. And it's just nice. So that is my answer.
So I mostly agree with a lot of what you have said.
All right. That's a good start.
I don't agree with the grill on that car. That's one thing I don't agree with.
That's fair. That's very fair.
We'll never lose sight of you in the rearview mirror, Casey. Look for the gigantic grill gleaming behind us.
Oh, so I think for me, like, one of the critical questions here is electric really an option? Like, so, this depends on a lot of the details of, the implementation details. Like, are we sticking together, Top Gear style?
Yeah, exactly. Because if we're not sticking together, we're not going to all sit around for you while you sip coffee for 45 minutes while your car charges.
Right. Like, I love driving the Model S, and I've driven it for lots of long highway trips. I drove it today on a long highway trip. I love it, but there is the reality that about every 4 to 5 hours of driving, depending on how you're driving, you're going to have to stop for about 40 minutes. I personally, in my life, owning these cars for now almost 4.5 years, whatever it is, I find that totally fine. I hardly ever have to actually do it in practice because I hardly ever take drives that are longer than that. And on the rare occasions I have found it pretty pleasurable, actually, because that is about, usually after about 4 hours, I want to stop for about a half hour anyway, just like to get some food or take a quick rest, whatever it is.
But the Top Gear rules. you stop, we just leave you behind.
Yep.
Sorry,
Right.
later. Like, there's no waiting.
Right. So for me, if you guys would actually wait for me, no question, Model S. No question at all.
Okay, so slow down. Why not the X? Not to say you're wrong. I'm just curious.
Because he wants to drive around in a shoe.
It gets less range, first of all. Yeah. First of all, I think it's less attractive. It also gets less range.
Fair enough.
You get a sunburn on his head. Have to wear his hat the whole time in the car.
I mean, the Model X is also excellent. It's very similar in many ways to the Model S, so really, I would be perfectly happy with that as well, but I would be happier with the S. So really the question becomes, like, is that the style of driving we're doing? Are we going across the country on the interstate highways? Or are we not using the interstate highways? Are we going to be somewhere crazy where there's not going to be any superchargers for, hundreds of miles around?
See, that's the thing that worries me more because you would know the supercharger network better than me. And I'm glancing at the map that's at tesla.com/supercharger. And it certainly does seem, just looking at the supercharger map, that there are some some east-west passages that clearly have superchargers pretty much the whole way across the country.
Oh, yeah.
But there's one that looks like, looking through North Dakota, which I don't know why we would go through North Dakota, but if we chose to go through North Dakota, it looks like there's some superchargers coming soon, but there's a long swath of road where superchargers are not there today. So I hear you, and I accept the answer with the caveats you've given, but I would also be curious, have you thought about, when you're done with the electric part, if there's a gasoline or diesel-powered option that you've considered? I would love to hear that as well.
Again, with the diesel. What do you care about diesel for?
Diesel would be terrible on a long road trip because you'd have to wait until you found a diesel gas station, which across the U.S., that's not going to be every highway exit.
I think it's probably plenty easy to find diesel, but I don't know if I want to listen to a diesel engine for
spoken like an American. Anyway, carry on. So any other thoughts about your electric?
I mean, like the whole appeal of gas is that you can stop at any exit off of the highway and pull in directly off of the ramp, and there's going to be a gas station there, and you can just get gas and be done in 10 minutes. Diesel makes that not always the case in America.
Totally.
I know, other countries it's much more common, but in America, if you're not in a very dense area, it might take you a few exits before you can find a station that has diesel, or it might not even tell you, and you just kind of have to guess and try a few until you find one. So it's not nearly as common. I think if you're going to go with any kind of burning fuel in America, you go with gas. But I still would really dramatically prefer electric because the self-driving is so good. And I know it's just a very comfortable car for long trips because I've taken many long trips in it. And I know it's, because for me, long trips, you're optimizing for comfort and ease of driving, basically. You want something that's going to be nice, that's going to be, fairly easy, but that you're also not going to get too bored with the car in, because any car gets boring on a long highway trip, but you at least want to have some fun with it, right? So that's why I didn't even think of things like a big old Mercedes boat, because I find them really boring and they just kind of don't get my gears revving, I guess. So for me, my number one pick was the Model S, with the caveat that only if we're actually going to stick together through the supercharging. If not, if I had to get a gas car for that purpose, I think I would go back to the M5. Even though I haven't yet ever seen the current generation one, and I certainly don't love the idea of its automatic transmission, despite what everybody says it being so, close enough to good. But I don't love the idea of that. I'm skeptical. But anyway, I did also take a lot of long road trips in the M5.
In more than one country, in 3 different countries. Well, no, 3. It was 2 countries here and 3 or 4 there. Is that right? Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So I've taken many long trips in that. I've driven thousands of miles in that, on the highway in the M5, and it's very comfortable. Because it's similar. It's a it's a large sedan. It has a lot of cushy interior features. It has the butt massaging seats. So there's all sorts of features like that. It has radar cruise control. So because that's, to me, if you're not going to give me self-driving that'll keep you in the lane, my minimum for long highway drives of functionality, if I'm going to make a pick like this, is it has to at least have adaptive speed cruise control, where it has the radar to look at the car in front and everything. It has to at least have that. So if we're having these things, to me, no question, it's the Model S first with the asterisk of electric waiting periods. And if you're not going to wait with me and I need to get a gas car, I'd probably go for the M5.
So, John, you'd have an Accord, and that's the end of the show. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next week.
I'm glad to hear that both of you have come around on the notion that if you're taking a long trip, the most important thing is to be comfortable, because now you're old and have old person butts and want your old person butts to be pampered. So no one's like getting a Ferrari Daytona and just being like, yes, I'm going to drive that for 25 hours because it gets old real fast and it's just not worth it. So my choice is the one you both kept talking about and dismissing because you are wrong.
The big old Mercedes.
The big old Mercedes. Check your show notes now. It is what do they call it? It's the AMG S63. It's faster than Casey's BMW. It is undoubtedly cushier and more luxurious. And the thing is, that's what I want for a long trip. I want to feel like I'm driving in a living room. I want it to be ridiculously comfortable. I don't care about the handling, right? I mean, having power is great, and this thing has plenty of power. You know, it's like 3.5 seconds to 60, huge top speed, but being comfortable for a long period. So yes, all these cars have heated and cooled seats and butt massagers or whatever, but the Mercedes ones have the reputation for being the most squishy, the least sporty, let's say, because even though the car is incredibly powerful, they're big squishy seats. Beautiful materials all over the interior. Burled walnut is what I selected for mine because I'm just a traditionalist. Yes, it's cliche, but it looks really nice. Everything is nice and leather. It smells good. You have good visibility. They have, their dashboard is a nice big screen, but not like a Tesla screen. It's more like just a regular large console that happens to be a screen. It's got a heads-up display. And I bet it's really quiet at speed. I bet it's very comfortable. But it feels as solid as a rock, and you can go down straight highways at high speed. Now, I'm going to depart from both of you on the whole requiring electronic assistance. I don't want any of that because I tend not to trust it. And all of my long road trips have been taken in cars without any of that stuff. And other than basic cruise control, so you don't have to hold the accelerator pedal down for hours at a time. Other than that, I don't need any other assistance. I'm sure this has them. I mean, all cars have them and everything like that. And I wouldn't do things like turn off the emergency braking system so that, like, if you're going to rear end the car in front of you and you're falling asleep, it will stop the car. Like, they all have that now. I would leave that on. I'm not saying I would, I got to turn off all the electric nannies because I'm going to, I got to drive it all myself. No, I would leave on, the emergency things, but things like lane keeping, cruise control, and maybe even radar detecting cruise control, be wary of. Because the thing is about long trips is, I want to be engaged enough to make sure I am paying attention. I can't let the car do too much. So even though the car has them, I wouldn't use them.
You say that, but have you experienced radar cruise control? Because radar cruise control is amazing.
I'm sure it is, but I feel like that is, for me personally, that is one level of engagement that is a little bit too... it's removed too much. I don't, especially with cruise control, and especially if you're going on long trips, there's not, you're on the open road, there's nobody around for miles. It's not as if you need it. And if I'm in traffic or whatever, remember, I've only ever owned stick shift cars. So if I'm not constantly shifting in traffic, that already is fairly luxurious to not have to be doing that. Right. So, maybe over the course of a long trip, I would come around to radar cruise control, but I would definitely never do line keeping. I am very down on lane keeping just because, if you know how the lane keeping stuff works, for the most part, GPS, highly accurate GPS maps aside, the car has no idea where the road is other than by looking out in front the same way a human would and trying to figure it out. And humans are better at that than cars by a long stretch. Driving in Massachusetts, where sometimes you will come upon a road that has 20 sets of lines going 100 different directions, some of which lead off into a ditch, I fear what a lane-keeping system would do when faced with that. You're hoping it would just throw up its hand and start beeping or something, but if there's one clear set of lines slowly leading off into the ditch, I have the feeling the car is going to take that route, and it's going to kill me. So I say no to lane-keeping. I say yes to big, luxurious, fast, quiet Mercedes. I actually considered going in, the only other direction I considered going in was picking a classic from my childhood Mercedes, because I took a couple of long road trips in my friend's father's 80s Mercedes, which is how I came to my Mercedes love, because I was always just amazed at how solid it felt and how quiet it was and how squishy the seats were and how fast he drove in it. And that always, that sort of gave me my childhood impression of Mercedes. And the 80s Mercedes were not particularly good looking, but they were smooth and they were solid and they were quiet and they were surprisingly fast. And the modern ones, I'm not sure if the modern ones are continuing with that tradition, but everything I've read about them makes me think that more or less BMWs are still slightly sportier in the large car, not in the rest of the car market these days, but in the large car market, BMW feels the need to be tougher and, stiffer suspension. So the M5, especially the M5 competition, is probably a much more harsh ride than any of the S-Classes. So that's why I'm going with my tried and true Mercedes S-Class. And so since I am the oldest and have the most old person butt and need to be cradled, I think that by the time we arrived at our destination, my body would have the least wear and tear despite being the oldest and the creakiest. And I even selected the model when I was building it that has like the rear seat heaters and coolers and everything so that on the way back, you two can just ride in the back of my car and we'll all be comfortable and we can just, ditch those other two lesser cars and not wait for Marco to have to fill up his battery again and just drive back in quiet.
Mm-hmm. A genuine question, and I think I know the answer. Why not the wagon?
There's no S-Class wagon.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, S-Class. You were correct. I'm sorry. I was looking at the S in E63S wagon, but no, you are correct. I apologize.
I was actually considering one of the coupe options because I'm like, I'm not going to have any people. It's us driving separately, but I got the big back seat for you two because I know you're going to want to get out of your uncomfortable car. You are going to want to get out of your uncomfortable cars. I got the wireless charging and the rear seat option, so you can just put your phone down when you want to charge it and the screens. You'll be all set back there. There was a thing called what was it in the options? It was something bucket.
There's an option to get a CD player in the glove box for $130.
I didn't pick that one.
Or for $5,000, you can get something called Magic Sky Control.
Yeah, that's the little stars in the sky. No, here it is.
No, it's not. It's like electronic tinting of the sunroof glass.
Ah, there you go. Because I didn't pick that either. Comfort box. Add to your driving peace of mind when carrying smaller items in the trunk. Oh, I thought this was like in the console. I see the picture. Box in the trunk to hold smaller items so they don't rattle around. It's only $350. I did not choose it. Anyway, the total price of mine is fairly reasonable considering how much luxury nonsense is in this car. And, performance stuff. Again, it's faster than Casey's BMW. I think it's also better looking. The total comes to... I picked good wheels, and I picked the blacked out light package, so there's less chrome. I think it's $151. It's pretty reasonable.
That's a Golf R more than my Phantom BMW, for God's sakes.
I mean, we're all picking cars that you can get a pretty good house in Ohio for this amount of money.
Yeah, but this is more comfortable than the house in Ohio.
Well done. This is all-wheel drive, is that right?
I didn't even look.
I think it is. I'm not confident I'm correct, though.
I feel like that's a must for a cross-country trip because, we also didn't specify, what kind of conditions are we driving through here? Right. Are we driving across the bottom of the country where it's going to be pretty warm, and therefore we might want things like sky control, or are we going to be going across the top of the country where? And what time of year is this? Are we going across the northern part of the country in the winter? Because that's going to possibly change my pick to some kind of giant monstrosity thing.
Actually, another thing to think about, John, is I don't think you have CarPlay in this, whereas I do. Probably wireless, in fact.
I don't care. I don't care about CarPlay.
You say that.
I almost picked the weird fancy 3D surround sound thing for the fancy speakers, but I decided the stock speakers are probably fine. I'll just be listening to podcasts anyway.
Yeah, right. It's what are we listening to that's going to use the fancy Burmester high-end 3D surround sound system for $6,400?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, these are all good choices. I'm not surprised by any of them, if I'm honest. But
yeah, they're all kind of boring choices.
Well, but that's the thing. When you reach a certain age and you're going to be in the car for hours, you want to be comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I didn't consider any kind of comedy option or fun old car. I'm not going to pick a DeLorean or anything. It's what you really want. Yeah, it's you want a comfortable car that's going to mostly drive itself on the highway, at least with cruise control, and you're going to want all the creature comforts of good climate control, good cushy ride, great visibility, quiet. And that's actually quiet is not great in the M5. The Model S is way quieter, and I'm sure your S Class is quiet as well. I also thought about things with a gas car, you want a car with a long range, so you don't have to stop as much to fill up. So you want like a really
not
big
the
gas
M5.
tank. Yeah, no, it really isn't.
No, those cars do have big gas tanks. Like, doesn't the M5 have like a 25-gallon gas tank or something?
They had to add a giant gas tank to it because it's so incredibly inefficient.
Yeah, the mileage isn't great, but that's the thing about these cars. You can just adding a bigger gas tank is really easy to do and extends the range by a ridiculous amount. Like there was some I think it was one of the Engineering Explained videos recently that was comparing like the range of a bunch of electric cars and everything, and saying like, oh, here's the long range Model S, and here is like, I forget, maybe it was a Camaro or something. I don't remember. It was a car with like terrible gas mileage, and it's like, so the long range Model S gets more on a fill up than this terrible like Camaro or whatever. So it's like, if you wanted to extend, but here's this other car that had like, it was I think it wasn't a Accord or something like that. That had a very long range because it was like a wimpy 4-cylinder. It's like, well, the electric cars can't match this range. It was like a 800-mile range or something. How much more battery would you have to add to the electric to match this range? And it was like, well, you'd have to add another 5,000 pounds or something. It was ridiculous, right? Then it was like, how much weight would you have to add to the Camaro to match the range? And it was like, you had to make the gas tank like 6 gallons bigger. It was nothing. Like, because the energy density of gasoline is phenomenal, and making the gas tank bigger weighs nothing, and putting the actual gas, it's like, it was ridiculous. It kind of really just hammered home the energy density dichotomy between gas cars and electric. Not that I'm saying we shouldn't all go electric, but like, boy, gas cars have it easy. So if you have a gas car with bad range, know that is entirely chosen based on like interior space concerns, and maybe if it's a sporty car, a little bit of weight. But really, gas is lightweight, energy dense, and it weighs nothing when it's not in your car.
If only there were no other problems with it.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Yeah, well,
All right. So, final question, since we are running long: if someone who is just filthy rich said, "I will literally buy these cars," and you decide whether or not we can keep them afterwards, but I will buy all 3 of these cars.
I'm glad I picked the most expensive one.
Yeah, see, exactly. Hey, I will hand you the keys, and you guys have to film or record or do something to chronicle the trip. But I will fund the trip of the 3 of you to go from New York to LA. Would you do it?
Does it have to be video?
Does it have to be LA?
No, and no. Fine. No, it does not. And no, it does not need to be LA. And no, it does not have to be video. Golly, tough crowd today.
Well, like to do video well would cost way more than these 3 cars are worth.
and that would be a hassle. Like,
doing video well is a giant pain in the butt and takes a lot of people. And
yeah, assume that whatever it is, it's no impact on us. Like if it's video, there's a film crew that handles everything. We just have to be the talent, as they say.
No, I would probably do it just for the life experience, as long as it wasn't a race, because I don't want to have to be like, rushed or, going fast or anything like that.
Yeah.
And honestly, if someone's paying for it, I would go as slow as possible and stop at every stupid tourist attraction and just like hang out and make it like an entire, I don't know. This is assuming I get time off work, but you know what I mean.
Well, I was going to say, what's like the babysitting situation here?
Yeah, that's the other. I was thinking to myself,
the exact tolerance of our respective spouses to have us gone for what amount of time? Doing what exactly?
Yeah. You're doing this why?
I have always wanted to do like a cross-country road trip, but...
amen.
It's road trip.
Oh, God.
I would love to do a cross-country road trip. I think that would be incredibly, incredibly fun.
And fly back, right?
Probably, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're not driving back.